Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 374, Return to Misty Mountains. Raising his gaze and surveying the numerous mutant beasts, Wuxia also did not hesitate and issued the command. Qin Gang Lightning Giant Bear as well as Whalefall will remain here. As for the rest, you will return to Misty Mountains with me. Upon hearing this, Qin Gang was slightly taken aback and instinctively asked, Master, You stay here and continue training the mutant polar bears, create a mighty army for our Misty Mountains? Before Qin Gang could ask too many questions, Wuxia interrupted him and explained. After a moment, shifting his gaze, Wuxia also looked at the orderly standing mutant polar bears at the base of the snowy peak, praising, the mutant polar bear tribe is no less powerful than the chimpanzee tribe of our Misty Mountains. They both have tremendous potential. Indeed. Qin Gang agreed, also acknowledging this. Then, Qin Gang's expression became earnest as he declared, Your subordinate will remain here and train the polar bears. Having declared, he seemed to have thought of something, and he further added in a heavy voice, Master, if there is a need, I'll definitely obey your command. Great. Wuxia smiled, finding himself rather content with Qin Gang's response. Leaving everything aside, Qin Gang was indeed praiseworthy in certain aspects. Or should be said, he lived up to being a human. When it came to flattery, he had plenty of experience. Of course, there was no denying that Qin Gang was loyal to him. At this moment, shifting his gaze, Wuxia looked towards the sea. Watching the colossal orcas closely watching him in the distance, Wuxia's corners of lips rose into a smile as he commanded, I'll leave the ocean to you. If there is anything you can notify Qin Gang. Immediately after, an inexplicable whistle echoed in the air. One after another, sound waves ripple outwards, filled with goodwill and warmth. These were ultrasonic waves. A very powerful ability, but under Whalefall's control, it gave the best response to Wuxia. And, understanding Whalefall's intention from the whistle, Wuxia nodded in satisfaction. Although Whalefall looked pretty fierce, his temperament was relatively gentle. Of course, that was towards his own kind. Against his enemies, his most terrifying and ruthless side would undoubtedly be revealed. After a short while, Wuxia was finished making simple arrangements. Then, without wasting another second, his gaze shifted towards the mutant beasts that were looking at him and straightforwardly ordered, Let's go, let's return home. With this order, without waiting for the other mutant beasts to react, Wuxia's tree body suddenly shook. Boom, 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 accompanied by tremors, the towering tree surprisingly shrank at a visible pace. Moments later, much to the mutant beast's perplexion, Wuxia's tree body, which was originally hundreds of meters tall, had now shrunk to a height of just over 10 meters. From a distance, he looked like an ordinary willow tree, with countless willow branches hanging down, forming a curtain of waterfalls. Although beautiful, he lacked the imposing sight of covering the entire sky. However, if one looked closely, they would certainly be shocked to find his entire body draped in starlight, a faint glow of starlight emanating from within. Even in the daytime, the bright and dazzling sunlight could not conceal the subtle radiance. This was a phenomenon caused by Wuxia's vast and majestic spiritual energy, unintentionally overflowing from his body. It looked extremely beautiful and mysterious too. However, to some extent, it also demonstrated Wuxia's current state. Even with the utmost restraint, it was difficult to conceal his majestic spiritual energy. One could imagine how formidable Wuxia was now. Wuxia did not dilly-dally, and with a long laugh, he, along with the five-color spirit flower, headed towards the direction of Misty Mountains. Boom, 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 accompanied by slight tremors, a willow tree over 10 meters tall drifted towards the south. However, compared to the tremors caused by his previous gigantic form, these tremors were negligible. Had they not been in proximity, many mutant beasts would have hardly noticed them. At this moment, looking at Wuxia leaving, Nine-Tails and Brewmaster looked at each with a smile before closely following after him. Swoosh, swoosh, as streaks of light fleeted by, the entire Arctic island gradually returned to its original tranquility. The only thing extra was an ice track extending towards the coast. These tracks were left by Brewmaster, Thorns and other mutant beasts. As for Nine-Tails, White Tiger and even Little White, they were all flying in the sky, displaying their might. Meanwhile in Misty Mountains. This mysterious and terrifying mountain range, known for its perennial mist, was experiencing fearsome tremors. Boom, 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 like a massive earthquake, the terrifying tremor shook everything within 1,000 kilometers. Countless mutant beasts stood in awe, looking at the terrifying behemoth the size of a hill in the distance. This behemoth was none other than Old Fourth Sarcosuchus of the 9 great beasts of Misty Mountains. Thanks to his solid foundation and steady accumulation, as well as the consumption of the heart and flesh of a Tier 3 mutant sea creature, he had already become a Tier 2 transcendent. Now, having successfully broken through, his size had increased to 70 to 80 meters. What did that signify? Well, most skyscrapers were only about this tall. While Sarcosuchus may not appear very tall, his spine-chilling length left all the onlookers in awe. Especially now, when Sarcosuchus was completely covered in thick and dense earthly yellow scales. At a glance, he appeared invulnerable, which no gun or sword could harm. Gruer, as he let out a roar, the terrifying sound waves made the endless forest bend. However, even with such majestic strength, Sarcosuchus still had a cold look in his eyes when looking towards the outskirts of Misty Mountains. Today marked the 7th day. Humans, after noticing Wuxia's absence, had been repeatedly probing, even sending people to investigate. Unfortunately, thanks to the veil of thick mist and various races of mutant beasts living in the mountains, human powerhouses found it difficult to step into Misty Mountains. Even so, Sarcosuchus wore a cold look on his face, and the culprit behind it was the squad of Iron Knights dispatched to the outskirts of Misty Mountains 7 days ago. The squad was not that big, only 10 were dispatched. However, each and every single one of them was a Tier 1 superhuman, and their captain happened to be a Tier 2 superhuman. As the current guardian of Misty Mountains, Sarcosuchus could not turn a blind eye to this. After much consideration, he led Titan and Tundra, as well as the Transcendent Spider, and many other mutant beasts to attack the Iron Knights at the outskirts of Misty Mountains. Luckily, the result of the battle was pretty good. Although there were casualties, the Iron Knight squad was stopped, unable to advance even an inch. However, recalling the Tier 2 superhuman who wielded a lance and rode a giant panda, Sarcosuchus' expression grew slightly unsightly. He was not afraid of the Tier 2 superhuman, but he was unable to take down the superhuman with his current strength. Instead, a stalemate had been formed. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 375, the Empress, Ling Air. And at this moment, on the outskirts of Misty Mountains. Jurr. Growling, a 3-meter-tall panda was licking the wound on its right arm. It was in pain, excruciating pain. Even though it had already become a Tier 2 transcendent, the excruciating pain still contorted its face. However, after a moment, as if remembering something, the panda turned its gaze towards a young woman sitting against a big tree not far away. Master. With a touch of concern, the panda approached. I'm okay. Waving off, the young girl with short hair and a heroic appearance stood up as if she was perfectly fine. However, in a moment the girl could not help but frown. She looked down toward her chest and surprisingly there was a huge blood stain. The legendary Sarcosuchus is indeed as formidable as they say. Recalling the gigantic and ferocious monster the size of a hill, the girl's face turned solemn. Just one whip. Just one whip of his tail. It sent her and her companion Eurolipoli tumbling thousands of meters. If it were not for the fact that she had protected herself with spiritual energy, that single strike would have left her severely injured. Thinking about it, Lu Ziyan could not help but sigh helplessly. It would have been better if you hadn't been injured. Saying this, Lu Ziyan gently stroked the head of her companion Eurolipoli. As one of the commanders of Iron Knights, she possessed exceptional talent, and had already become a Tier 2 superhuman at a very young age. However, what distressed her was that her companion, Eurolipoli had suffered serious injuries in the past while trying to save her. Those injuries had lasting effects, causing Eurolipoli to be stuck at the peak of Tier 1. This was a cruel reality not only for Eurolipoli but also for Lu Ziyan. The members of the Iron Knights, though possessed terrifying combat power, they were inseparable from their mounts. They were as close as brothers and sisters. To a certain extent, even the cultivation was tied to each other. Now, the fact that her companion was stuck at the peak of Tier 1 meant that her path to transcendence had come to a halt. Due to this, Lu Ziyan's status among the Iron Knights plummeted. Otherwise, with her talent, how could the higher-ups allow her to venture into such dangerous territory? Of course, she could choose to abandon her companion and forsake the path of a knight she was currently on. But, is that even possible? Just the thought of it made Lu Ziyan clench her fists involuntarily. At this moment, as if sensing Lu Ziyan's complex emotions, a low whimper echoed in the air. Hearing this whimper, Lu Ziyan slightly raised her eyes, then shook her head helplessly, comforting Relipoli. "Don't blame yourself, it's not your fault." Saying this, Lu Ziyan slowly raised her gaze, looking towards the depths of Misty Mountains, and declared in a resolute tone, "I'll definitely get my hands on the tree monster's life essence for you. This is not just for you but also for myself." According to the rumors, life essence is the spirit essence nurtured by the tree monster. Not only can it bring back someone from the verge of death, but it can also regrow flesh from just bones. It's a true and rare treasure. Not only can it heal Relipoli, but Relipoli might even advance a step further. If and when Relipoli breaks through to Tier 2, given our tacit understanding and mutual cooperation, our combat power would jump by a whole new level. The increase would not be just as simple as 1 plus 1. Even if Relipoli would have just become a Tier 2 Transcendent, coupled with my current strength, we would be able to secure a decent rank among Tier 2 superhumans. This was the frightening aspect of the Chinese knights. Man as an invincible spear, capable of destroying any stronghold. Beast as an impregnable shield, nothing could breach its defense. The tacit cooperation between humans and beasts would redefine the ancient and enduring profession of knights, perhaps even push it back onto the world's mainstream stage. However, at this moment, as if thinking of something, Lu Ziyan's complexion slightly darkened. How could it be that easy to obtain life essence? Not to mention the unfathomable tree monster, I am even having a hard time contending with just one mutant beast under the tree monster. If the tree monster isn't away and there is a spirit pond in the heart of Misty Mountains containing its life essence, I would not have taken the risk and secretly lead a squad here. However, thinking of this, Lu Ziyan's lips could not help but move. Res. Softly murmuring, a touch of fear appeared on Lu Ziyan's face. The Empress, Healing Air, the most famous and unfathomable woman in China. At a really young age she had become a Tier 2 superhuman, and possessed unfathomable strength. Half a month ago she displayed unparalleled strength when besieging the 5-color spirit flower. Even White Emperor, Wang Hao and Zhao Jiao, prodigies just like her, were totally eclipsed by her. More importantly, in that shocking war that shook the entire China, White Emperor, Wang Hao suffered severe injuries, and Zhao Jiao mysteriously disappeared and was still missing. Rumor had already started that he had fallen under the claws of the mutant beasts from Misty Mountains. Whereas Empress Healing Air, except for being missing for a few days and having a slightly disordered aura, she returned totally unharmed. More shockingly, just a few days ago she even made another breakthrough and reached the late stage of Tier 2. Her terrifying strength even left the few most mysterious individuals in China in dread, to the point that everyone was having a hard time digesting it. This was already proof in itself how terrifying the woman titled Empress was. She had only come to Misty Mountains under the guidance of the Empress, Healing Air. It was also the Empress, Healing Air, who revealed to her that there was a rare treasure called Life Essence in Misty Mountains. According to what Healing Air said to her, when I was being pursued, I happened to escape to the depths of Misty Mountains, where I accidentally obtained a few drops of Life Essence. 3 drops had helped me break through and now only 1 drop remained. It was precisely because of that drop of life essence that Healing Air had shown her that Lu Ziyan believed that if she could find enough life essence, her battle companion would surely recover. Recalling that drop of green liquid, sparkling like crystals, and emitting a rich vitality, Lu Ziyan could not help but lightly nibble her lip as a look of excitement appeared on her face. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 376, Dragon Slaying. Meanwhile, in a pavilion by the lake, a graceful and elegant figure was standing quietly by the lakeside. Her hair looked the very embodiment of flames, and her feet were fair and smooth as jade, untouched by dust. Upon closer inspection, one would notice a cloud of mist-like purple flame below her feet, lifting her in the air, less than 3 centimeters above the ground. Walking on air, a very unique and monstrous technique. This was a method unique to the Empress, Healing Air, and it was also her most iconic ability. Using her formidable psychic power, she made the flames tangible, and then using these flames she lifted her body parallel to the ground. This technique demanded not only exquisite control but also vast reserves of spiritual energy. Most people would not even dare to think about attempting it, let alone achieve it. At this moment Ling Air's voice echoed in the air, "What's Lu Ziyan doing now?" She has already arrived at Misty Mountains and has also clashed with Fourth Brother several times. As the words fell, a black streak of light zoomed through the air. The next moment, a beautiful black peregrine falcon was perching on Ling Er's shoulder. And Ling Er nodded slightly, satisfied with the result. While Lu Ziyan possessed terrifying talents, due to her Mount Rolipoli's old injuries, her cultivation had stagnated for several months. Although she remained stronger than an ordinary Tier 2 superhuman, there was almost zero chance of her surpassing Sarcosuchus. As a result, she who was really eager to save her mount, would be blocked outside of Misty Mountains. And this was exactly what Ling Er hoped to see. On one hand, clashing repeatedly with her would allow Sarcosuchus and even Misty Mountains a better understanding of the formidable Iron Knights, one of the legendary units of China. On the other hand, if Sarcosuchus decided to be ruthless and led numerous mutant beasts to attack her, paying no heed to casualties, or when Wuxia returned and then suppressed them with force, a significant portion of the strength of this legendary unit would be compromised. The Iron Knights had a total of 7 commanders. Lu Ziyan happened to be the most gifted but also the weakest of them all. If she were to fall in Misty Mountains because of this, the overall threat of the Iron Knights would be reduced by 30%. This suggested that although formidable, the Iron Knights still had certain weaknesses. These weaknesses, if discovered by Misty Mountains or Wuxia, would lead them to not need to worry about the Iron Knights no matter how strong they were. In other words, this was just a little scheme devised by Ling Er. Taking advantage of Lu Ziyan's desperate desire to save her mount, and complementing it with the temptation of the life essence, Ling Er had effortlessly delivered a small squad of Iron Knights into Misty Mountains' hands. Not only could this allow the numerous mutant beasts of Misty Mountains to study this legendary force, but it could also cut off an arm of the Iron Knights. Of course, Ling Er also had a backup plan. If Lu Ziyan miraculously survived and managed to walk out of Misty Mountains, she would face the siege of Otherkins, the most hated and loathed individuals in all of China at the moment. The ambush would consist of 300 Otherkins, led by Vampire Carrie. As these thoughts swirled in Ling Er's mind, the corner of her lips rose as a playful expression appeared on her face. Ling Er was feeling quite satisfied with her petty scheme. After all, a human prodigy on par with Zhao Jiao falling in Misty Mountains would be quite good for Misty Mountains. However, thinking of Zhao Jiao, Ling Er suddenly paused. Then she slowly raised her hand as an illusory and very petite black snake gradually manifested, coiled around her arm. Darkness Serpent, the manifestation of Zhao Jiao's innate talent. The Darkness Serpent was a formidable and incredibly powerful species in the last era, far beyond ordinary people could comprehend. And now this Darkness Serpent, like the Silver Centipede, not only had a part of its talent stolen by Ling Er, but had also become Ling Er's weapon. It was due to Ling Er devouring the manifestation of Zhao Jiao's innate talent that she successfully broke the shackles and entered the late stage of Tier 2. This was what ordinary people referred to as 700,000 spiritual energy barrier. While Ling Er was standing quietly by the lake in contemplation, suddenly, the sound of footsteps approached from outside. Miss Ling Er, calling, a charming girl draped in white cloak approached the pavilion. What's the matter? Ling Er furrowed her brow slightly, a bit surprised. These girls who followed her knew that she disliked being disturbed, especially when she was alone. She wondered what had happened for them to disregard her preferences and call out to her. Miss Ling Er, a message has just arrived from the capital. While speaking, the charming girl raised a letter in her hand. Seeing this, Ling Er slightly opened her right hand. Immediately after, a terrifying suction emerged from her hand, causing the letter to fly over dozens of meters and land in her hand. This was a top-secret correspondence. Generally, it could only be issued by the highest office in China. In other words, something big must have happened, enough to shake the entire China. Thinking this, Ling Er signaled the charming girl to step back, before slowly opening the letter. The next moment, Ling Er's pupils flickered uncontrollably as she read the letter. Faintly, there was an inexplicable radiance flashing in the depths of Ling Er's eyes. Australia, Wyvern attacking overseas? Amidst a series of murmurs, an astonished look appeared on Ling Er's face. She could not help but admit that humans in a certain sense were a crazy species. Just because they found a recently advanced Tier 3 transcendent, they were already thinking of executing an overseas mission which was absolutely crazy. After all, the ocean was the most unpredictable and dangerous place in the world. Even though humans had developed certain technologies to equip ships with spiritual energy shields, it was still extremely perilous. However, after thinking about the wyvern mentioned in the correspondence, Ling Er seemed to have faintly understood the reason behind it. The appearance of a species that had only existed in myths and legends was enough to drive humans crazy. After all, if they succeeded in slaying a dragon, the corpse alone would be enough to propel human research and evolution forward by leaps and bounds. A prize so tempting could indeed blind humans, to the extent that they might overlook the terror of a Tier 3 transcendent. And the higher officials in the Chinese government had sent Ling Er this letter to invite her to discuss the matter of dragon slaying. As one of the current top-tier experts in China, Ling Er's status was starting to be reflected. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 377, Return of Wuxia and the Surging Mist. Taking a long, deep breath, Ling Er casually organized the information in the letter. After a moment, with a lift of her fingertips, the peregrine falcon spread his wings, screech, then with a soft cry the peregrine falcon transformed into a black streak of light, quietly disappearing into the depths of the dark clouds. This was the eldest of the peregrine falcon, Fal-I, and also the only peregrine falcon that had broken through to the Tier 2. He was as fast as lightning, surpassing the speed of sound. Furthermore, he was pretty good at hiding his presence. With his current speed, not to mention taking off in a place with minimal human presence, even in a bustling city, he could come and go without alerting anyone. No one would notice him. What made him even more formidable was that as long as the distance was not within a kilometer, the peregrine falcon could ensure that Tier 2 transcendents could only detect a fleeting trace of his aura. If they want to really find his traces, it would be 1,000 times more difficult. This was the terrifying aspect of the peregrine falcon. After having advanced to Tier 2, it was acclaimed as the fasted mutant bird. Its excessively terrifying speed allowed it to freely traverse the airspace above human cities. Furthermore, with the guidance of Wuxia, the peregrine falcons focused on restraining their auras and controlling their spiritual energy. After a long period of evolution and deliberate efforts, the oldest of the peregrine falcons had now reached a level where he could come and go without a trace. Amidst howling cold winds of the north, a fleeting streak of light swooshed through the atmosphere. Boom. As he became faster and faster, he broke the sonic barrier, causing a sonic boom. In just 4 hours since departure, the peregrine falcon had already arrived in the Arctic region. Now he did not need to conceal his aura. Boom, 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 with continuous acceleration, a series of sonic booms echoed in the air. From the distance, a wave of white stretched out from the depths of the clouds. It was terrifying and frightening. However, just at this moment, as if noticing something, the falcon eyes of Fal-I suddenly narrowed. In his sight, much to his surprise, he noticed a streak of green light rapidly approaching from the distant horizon. Screech. Fal-I instinctively let out a piercing cry as a trace of panic appeared on his face because this streak of green light was too fast, to the point that, in the blink of an eye, the green light had already drawn near. In the face of such an unfathomable speed, even Fal-I could not help but feel inferior. The sense of pride that had just risen in his heart was shattered in an instant. However, in a moment, a very familiar voice suddenly echoed in Fal-I's mind. "You've broken through, huh? But it's still not enough, Amidst the faint doting voice, another streak of green light shot towards him. "Master." After a daze for a while, Fal-I finally realized the identity of this streak of green light. However, before he could react, a crystalline emerald branch resembling a luminous mystical chain with blue radiance had already entwined around his body, pulling him towards the ground. After several breaths, on a vast plain in the Arctic region, a willow tree over 10 meters high stood quietly. A faint halo surrounded it. From inside out, it exuded an extraordinary and noble aura. At this moment, on a branch of this willow tree, a fist-sized peregrine falcon was joyfully hopping up and down, chittering non-stop. "Master, you scared me to death. I almost thought I wouldn't make it. But seriously, you are too fast. You know, my speed is already terrifying, and when accelerating I repeatedly break the sound barrier. Yet." In the consecutive claims, Fal-I could not hide the complacency in his voice. After all, it was hard for him to show off in front of his master. All right, I know you're amazing." A branch gently caressed Fal-I's head as Wuxia praised him with a hint of smile. "Your speed is indeed impressive. Among your peers there are probably few who can compare." Screech, giving joyful chirps, Fal-I raised his head high. However, after a moment, as if realizing something, Fal-I's voice softened. He stated in a feeble voice, "Even though I'm this fast, I was still easily caught by Master. How can you compare to me? We both are in completely different tiers." Rebuking Yuziyu continued to console, "Child, if you can break through to tier 3, even I might be wary of your speed." "Really?" Foul Eye's dark eyes rolled around a few times, and a look of expectation appeared on his face. "If that's true, then when I break through to tier 3, will Master treat me differently?" However, just at that moment, as if remembering something, Foul Eye shook his head, dispelling the rising whimsical thoughts and getting back to the main topic. "Master, I was sent to you. Eldest sister Ling Er has asked me to bring you some news." With that, Foul Eye conveyed Ling Er's message to Yuziyu word for word. Listening quietly to Falin's account, Yuziyu's eyes could not help but narrow slightly. Wyvern. Australia. Tier 3 Transcendent. Lu Ziyin, these unfamiliar terms piqued his curiosity. However, looking at the several streaks of light approaching, now was evidently not the time to dwell on this. One streak was like a blazing meteor tearing through the atmosphere. Yuziyu even felt surging heat waves rushing from the sky. Another streak was accompanied by the howls of the wind, surrounded by a countless storm of sharp blade-like gusts. And the last streak was surrounded in icy cold mist. And in the hazy mist, a figure resembling a dragon could be seen every now and then. These three were none other than Nine Tails, White Tiger, and the White Flood Dragon Little White. All three of them could fly. In terms of speed, even Brewmaster could only stare helplessly. "They've all caught up. Okay, let's head back." Saying so, Yuziyu shot in the direction of the Misty Mountains with Foul Eye. Misty Mountains could no longer be considered far for Yuziyu. With his current speed, several hours were more than enough. Shortly after, as if noticing something, Yuziyu's eyes suddenly narrowed. In his gaze, a vast forest appeared on the distant horizon. A boundless sea of greenery with no end in sight. However, upon a closer look, one could actually see a faint mist at the end of that forest. The fog pervaded the sky, like a ferocious beast waiting to devour someone, quietly lurking at the end of the horizon. "Misty Mountains," muttered Yuziyu as a smile appeared on his face. This feeling of returning home was somewhat unfamiliar to him. Nevertheless, it felt good. However, at this moment, as if sensing something. Boom, boom, boom. In the distant horizon, the vast expanse of mist started rolling in, resembling a towering wave that connected the sky and the earth, rushing towards Yuziyu. For a moment, not to mention the forest bordering the mist, even the numerous mutant beasts hidden deep within the fog were alarmed. Ability, Mastery of Mist, Level 3, you can absolutely control the mist you create. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 378, Manipulation of Mist. The vast expanse of mist rolled back, like the roaring sandstorm in the desert or the howling winds of the north. Boom, visible to the naked eye, within the surging mist, waves of mist swirled towards a certain direction. "What is this?" With a hint of confusion, Lu Ziyin, who was healing on the outskirts of Misty Mountains, suddenly exclaimed. In her gaze, the pervasive fog in the forest seemed to come alive, all starting to flow. Even more terrifyingly, the entire Misty Mountains appeared to have awakened. Gruar, as a thunderous roar shook the forest in the distance, a gigantic figure, around the size of a hill, rose. "Master." Amidst an inexplicable call, Lu Ziyin vaguely caught sight of her thorny opponent, the formidable Sarcosuchus in the distance, rushing towards a direction excitedly. At the same time. Boom, 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 the ground started trembling as if a herd of 1,000 horses was trampling the earth. Tens of thousands of beasts galloped. Among them were mutant macaques, swinging from one branch to another, swiftly speeding towards a direction. There were also black torrents flowing out from the underground, swiftly blanketing the ground. This happened to be the horrifying black rat tide that made humans turn pale. But they were still not the most terrifying. The most terrifying things were in the distance. Asterisk thump, thump, thump. Along with the heavy footsteps, powerful tremors shook the ground. More than 20 human-like figures, each carrying a tree, were marching towards the distance. The trees they were carrying were gigantic. Trees dozens of meters long and so wide that they would require about a dozen people to hug, looked like toys in their hands. It was only because each of the figures was over 20 meters tall, and possessed robust figures, that it did not seem too strange. Furthermore, they were taking orderly strides. They were like the most formidable soldiers, silently conveying strict discipline. Though only a little more than 20 people, they marched with a more terrifying momentum than an entire army. What's going on? Amidst cries filled with incredulity, several Iron Knights standing behind Lu Ziyin had their faces changed. How is this possible? How can there be such huge humanoid figures? And they look more like soldiers than real soldiers. They are all robust yet upright. They are all marching in complete silence with disciplined order. This is simply unbelievable. Mutant chimpanzees, and not just ordinary ones. Behind Lu Ziyan, the pupils of a young man with a sight-related innate talent shrunk continuously, shrinking to the size of a pinhole, as he conveyed the information he saw from 1,000 kilometers away. How is it possible for such giant chimpanzees to exist? Someone refuted, having a hard time digesting this. But after a moment, as he laid eyes on the figures walking towards the distance, the person fell silent. Humanoid figures with thick arms reaching to the ground, if they were not chimpanzees, what could they be? There's nothing impossible. In a calm voice, Lu Ziyan also tightened her grip on the knight's lance at her side. After a moment, as if realizing something, she added with a helpless sigh, "We should be thankful that these guys didn't make a move earlier." Indeed. After a moment of silence, everyone could not help but nod in agreement. Not to mention anything else, just the imposing aura emanating from them, even from this considerable distance, put everyone on edge. It was as if they had run into the most top-notch predators. Especially the figure at the forefront, with a height of over 30 meters. Its size alone sent shivers down everyone's spine. By a rough estimation, the strength of such an entity would not be any less than that of Sarcosuchus. However, just at this moment, as if thinking of something, Lu Ziyan's face suddenly changed, looking in the direction the mist was surging with incredulity. Surging mist and countless mutant beasts rushing out from the depths of misty mountains. What did this mean? Just thinking about this, Lu Ziyan's heart felt as if it had been grabbed by someone. "Retreat, quickly retreat." Shouting in an anxious voice, the girl holding the knight's lance jumped and flipped in the air, landing on the tall shoulder of the panda. "Yes, madam." Everyone promptly followed the orders, no one hesitated or questioned even for a moment. Just as Lu Ziyan spoke, the other 9 people all jumped onto the shoulders of their mounts. As a squad, they had absolute trust in their commander. So, when they heard her anxious commands, they naturally would not hesitate. However, just as they jumped onto the shoulders of the pandas, an ethereal but playful laughter suddenly came from all directions. "Where do you think you're going?" "You're going?" Clearly, the voice had just spoken once, but it echoed again and again, like a repeating machine continuously playing in their minds. "Ah!" A figure standing on the shoulder of a panda let out a painful scream, holding his head in pain. But before he could do anything more, clouds of mist, as if receiving some command, instantly turned into long snakes one after another, rushing towards this figure. After a moment, much to Lu Ziyan's shock and dismay, ropes of mist had already bound the limbs of her squad. Furthermore, more mist rushed towards her squadmates' mouths, ears and noses. At a glance, it looked both eerie and terrifying. "No!" Lu Ziyan, standing on the shoulder of the panda, tightened her grip on the lance to the point that her hands became bloody, and rushed straight towards her squadmate Zhang Xiaobai, like an arrow fired from a bow. However, in a moment, with a deafening roar, waves of fog rolled in. In Lu Ziyan's unbelieving eyes, Zhang Xiaobai unexpectedly swung the lance in his hand, fiercely swinging towards her. Bang! The clash of lances created a series of sparks, scattering in every direction. The powerful clash also triggered mighty shockwaves in succession. Zhang Xiaobai was clearly just an ordinary Tier 1 superhuman, yet the strength he was displaying even caused Lu Ziyan's hand to go numb. However, that was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that Zhang Xiaobai, this guy with a firm will, was actually being controlled by someone. Lu Ziyan was in utter disbelief. How is this even possible? As a member of the Iron Knights, each member's will is as firm as iron. Not to mention manipulation, even making them experience fear is difficult. But now... However, after a while, as if realizing something, Lu Ziyan's pupils suddenly contracted. Looking closely, she astonishingly discovered that Zhang Xiaobai was being manipulated like a puppet with strings. She found that countless threads of mist happened to entwine him. In other words, a terrifying entity was forcibly manipulating his body using the mist. The unknown entity was manipulating his body, not his mind. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 379, Frozen. Absolute parasitism. Using absolute control over the mist, you inject it into the enemy's limbs and bones, truly manipulating their body. Can only control the body, not interfere with the consciousness. This was a rather bizarre method that Yuziyu developed during his free time. For those of the same tier it might not be effective. However, against those weaker than him, with strength that was miles away from his own, it was surprisingly quite effective. Just like now, in the midst of a cacophony of miserable screams, one figure after another was suspended in the air, propped up by the mist. Looking from a distance, the girl named Lu Ziyan was surrounded by familiar yet unfamiliar companions, one after another. As for their mounts, the pandas, unfortunately, under Yuziyu's mist interference, they were separated. Clearly they were close at hand, but they could not see or touch each other. This was the most terrifying aspect of the mist that shrouded Misty Mountains. It could perfectly coordinate with Yuziyu's ability, hallucinogen, confusing others' five senses and even removing their five senses. Pandas, although terrifying, the terrifying part about them was their defense. Having been with Brewmaster, Yuziyu was well aware of this. So, using some bizarre means, Yuziyu managed to easily suppress this human squad. To be accurate, it was not very easily. Rather, it was effortless. He did it with just a flash of thought. Even someone as powerful as Lu Ziyan was easily subdued with just some petty tricks. Like now, Lu Ziyan had already suffered multiple injuries when facing successive attacks from her companions, just because she did not want to harm them. Squish! The tip of the lance came thrusting towards Lu Ziyan, tearing through her sleeve, leaving behind a series of bloodstains. On another side, with a thunderous clap, a burly man swung the lance in his hand fiercely towards Lu Ziyan's back. What made Lu Ziyan's face change dramatically was that Zhang Xiaobai in front of her was also charging towards her lance. In other words, if she did not reserve her strength, this lance would pierce through Zhang Xiaobai for sure. Damn it! In a voice full of unwillingness, Lu Ziyan had done her best to reserve her strength. However, the next moment, with a tremendous crash, she was sent flying. Cough, cough, cough. Breaking into a series of coughs, Lu Ziyan was unable to straighten her body. At this moment, if one looked at her back, he or she would definitely see that the fair and smooth skin, originally like white jade, was now marred with blood and mutilation. Tree. Monster. Muttering in a voice filled with complex emotions, Lu Ziyan slowly raised her eyes, only to see figure after figure with lances slowly surrounding her. Ha! Lu Ziyan let out a laugh filled with anguish as she tried to prop up her body again. However, the next moment, a cold wave blew on her face. Before Lu Ziyan could react, a cold beam as thick as a water bucket had already descended from the sky. Boom! With a deafening boom, a layer of frost covered everything in the vicinity of the beam. At this moment, if one were to look at this battlefield, they would surely see 10 ice sculptures standing quietly at the center. 9 human figures holding lances, all with their tips pointing towards the center. At the center was a pale-as-paper girl, kneeling on one knee with her clothes stained in blood. It was a very beautiful sight. Although somewhat desolate, the ice sculptures with white cold mist rising from them painted a beautiful picture. Ha ha ha, just a small squad dares to invade Misty Mountains? Amidst a cacophony of laughter, a figure resembling a snake and a dragon appeared. In a moment, Little White's tail swept through the battlefield, carrying these 10 frozen figures towards the depths of Misty Mountains. As far as the current superhumans were concerned, this kind of freezing was not fatal. It was the kind of instantaneous freezing that would definitely not kill them. Of course, serious injuries were inevitable. Such extreme cold temperatures may freeze nearly half of their cells to necrosis. If not thawed in time, things would not end that well for them. Meanwhile in the mist. Tap, tap, tap. Hearing heavy footsteps, one panda after another turned their heads with solemn expressions. They were all professionally trained, not only firm-willed but also with rich combat experience. Even now, when their masters were out of their sight, they did not panic. Instead, they formed a circle back to back. Just at this moment, gazing into the deep mist, a surprised voice suddenly rang in the forest, as if discovering something incredible. You are. The voice was filled with utter disbelief. But gazing at the somewhat chubby figure slowly walking out from the depths of the dense mist, even the face of the panda Rolipoli stiffened. The figure happened to be wearing a straw hat on its head and a pair of black boots on its leg. It had a black and white fur fluttering along the wind, and in its hand, there was a wine pot. When it walked, its gait was unsteady and swaying. After watching on patiently, most of the pandas froze. Kinsman? How can there be our kinsman out here? One after another, doubt filled the faces of most pandas as they looked at each other. However, at this moment, no one noticed that Rollipoli's expression became even more complicated. "Long time no see, brother." Brewmaster's mouth parted, greeting. "Long brother?" Replying in a somewhat stiff voice, the corners of Rollipoli's mouth twitched. As kinsmen, there were originally 4 pandas who gained sentience at the beginning. Among these 4, the eldest and second oldest were related by blood, and other 2 were Rollipoli and another named Leah. However, fate was pitiful. Rollipoli was the second to awaken intelligence. Logically speaking, he should be the second in rank. However, Brewmaster, using brute force, actually pummeled Rollipoli from the second to the third position. If it were not for the fact that Brewmaster did not wish to beat the eldest, with him being his real sibling, Brewmaster, he might have even tried to take on the eldest. This in itself was proof of Brewmaster's ferocity. And now, Brewmaster, who was hailed as the troublemaker of the panda tribe, had unexpectedly appeared in front of him. What was even more crucial was Brewmaster's strength. Rollipoli failed to gauge his strength. In an increasingly stiff expression, Rollipoli was on the verge of tears. But in a moment he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly spoke excitedly, trying to grab a life-saving straw. "Old second, no brother, where's my master? Where is she?" Amidst his anxious questions, Rollipoli's eyes held a trace of expectation. However, at this moment he failed to notice Brewmaster's gaze of scrutiny when looking at him. "Who injured your foundation?" In Brewmaster's calm but deep voice, there was an unusual touch of coldness inside. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 380, the 10 monstrosities of the continent, the Snake Queen. Brewmaster may fight, may fool around, but he did not play games with emotions. In human terms, Brewmaster was like a hoodlum. Although unruly and reckless, even daring to escape from humans and his pack at great risk, he was quite sentimental. Wuxia had long noticed this, which is why he did not make any move on these pandas. He decided to leave them to Brewmaster. Wuxia wanted Brewmaster to weigh his options between Misty Mountains and his pack. Foundation. Muttering to himself, Rollipoli could not help but recall that journey to the western desert. Facing that monster, if I had not risked heavy injuries to cover the team's retreat, the entire team might have been buried in the western desert. And that monster. A monster with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a snake. The Snake Queen is one of the 10 monstrosities of the continent. The Snake Queen happened to be a very fearsome mutant beast. Her upper body, the human part, was extremely beautiful and spellbinding. Even humans with firm will would waver if they looked at it for too long, and would eventually be petrified. Her lower body, on the other hand, was a snake tail covered in dark green scales, which could easily create sandstorms and fierce winds. With her terrifying strength combined with her strange and eerie body, she firmly held the 7th position among the 10 monstrosities of the continent. According to some expert speculation, she should be a kind of serpent-type mutant beast that devoured a human girl, resulting in this abnormal yet extremely frightening evolution. The reason she was identified as a mutant beast was that she was as cold and terrifying as a snake. Although she possessed intelligence, she maintained the lifestyle of a serpent-type mutant beast. In other words, she was like Thorns, a combination of mutant plant and human. However, while Thorn's actions were driven by her human's consciousness, Snake Queen's actions were predominantly dominated by her mutant beast instincts. It was the Snake Queen. Last time we ran into her and I almost lost my life. Saying so, Rollipoli could not help but touch his chest as lingering fear gripped his heart. Snake Queen. Softly murmuring, Panda's gaze could not help but flicker with uncertainty. Naturally, he was not unfamiliar with the Snake Queen. Moreover, the entire Misty Mountain, thanks to access to the intelligence of China, was well acquainted with the widely recognized 10 monstrosities of the continent. Just like the North Darkness bird that Bull Demon encountered in the Deadwood Wasteland, the Snake Queen was also quite notorious among the 10 monstrosities. It should be noted that strength was just one of the reasons to be included in the ranks of the 10 monstrosities of the continent. The second reason was that they caused catastrophic disasters, resulting in heavy losses for humans. For instance, the Northern Darkness bird once unleashed a huge storm along the coastal city with just a flap of its wings. That storm laid waste to more than half of the city's defenses, leading to a massive influx of mutant sea beasts and resulting in heavy losses. As for the Snake Queen, she was notorious because she lived in the desert, and had petrified 40 to 50% of a city's population. In the face of such terrifying petrification, everyone was equal. Even same-tier superhumans dared not look directly into her eyes. Even today, a ruined city in the desert is adorned with countless cold yet lifelike statues. This also vividly illustrated the terror of these 10 monstrosities of the continent. Of course, this was not the main reason why many beasts of Misty Mountains were familiar with the 10 monstrosities of the continent. After all, in terms of combat power, Nine Tails and Brewmaster did not think they would lose to the later members' 10 monstrosities of the continent. They would even dare to challenge the former ones head-on. The reason those guys were ranked in the 10 monstrosities of the continent was merely because their notorious deeds had left a deep impression on countless humans. If Nine Tails and Brewmaster wreaked havoc in human cities like those individuals, presumably, 2 creatures among the 10 monstrosities of the continent would be replaced the very next day. The reason why many mutant beasts in Misty Mountain were familiar with the 10 monstrosities of the continent was mainly because their master, the Divine Tree, being ranked first among them. The Divine Tree, their most beloved master. According to the catalogue of the 10 monstrosities of the continent, there was a description of Wuxia. Majestic as the vast sea, malevolent as the depths of hell, unleashing a colossal earthquake on the ominous dark day, spanning across thousands and thousands of kilometers, the menace that still lives. Although they were enemies, there was no denying that humans were quite honest in a certain sense. They did not exaggerate nor did they belittle. However, it made sense. This kind of catalog was meant for future reference, and if the information was incorrect, people could lose their lives. Brewmaster did not say anything, or rather, there was no need to say anything. He just silently kept the name Snake Queen in mind, to settle the score later if they crossed paths. Of course, this was just a side note. When powerful mutant beasts encountered each other in the wild, it would naturally lead to a battle. Not every mutant beast could live harmoniously like those in Misty Mountains. For most mutant beasts, survival of the fittest was the norm. The strong lived and the weak died. This was the law of the jungle. Now, if and when Brewmaster ran into the Snake Queen, he just had another reason to take action. After all, considering that his little brother was injured, both emotionally and logically, he had to make a move. Otherwise he, as an older brother, would be unable to raise his head. As for seeking revenge against the Snake Queen, unfortunately he could not do that right now. Not only because the whereabouts of the Snake Queen were always mysterious, but also because he was a member of Misty Mountains and had heavy responsibilities. Taking a deep breath, Brewmaster took a sip of wine and slowly raised his gaze. When he noticed the eager and hopeful gaze of Rolipoli, he straightforwardly proposed, "Let's go." Saying so, he silently turned around. Go where? Stunned for a moment, Rolipoli failed to follow Brewmaster's train of thought. To meet Divine Tree. Grinning, Brewmaster did not hide anything. However, after a while, Brewmaster, noticing that several figures behind him were frozen and wearing stiff expressions, added in a gentle voice, "By the way, your masters are also there." Just as these words echoed in the forest. Ba ba ba. Giving out a series of complex bleats, the pandas, led by Rolipoli, quickly followed the figure, disappearing into the depths of the mist without a moment of hesitation. Meanwhile, in the North Canyon at the heart of Misty Mountains, a towering willow tree stood quietly. After gazing deeply into the distance, the corners of Wuxia's mouth curled up slightly. I guess old Nine still have some sway in their tribe. Are you sure it's not because you caught the owners of these pandas? Asked the 5-color spirit flower, expressing doubt. Well, that's also another reason, Wuxia admitted after a slight pause. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 381, First Encounter. Divine Tree. A hazy veil of mist lingered in the air, casting a halo of light upon the surroundings. Near the spirit pond stood a willow tree, its slender branches resembling ethereal chains of verdant green light, gently hung and dipping into the colorful waters of the spirit pond. Occasionally, a gentle breeze would sway the luminous willow branches, creating discernible ripples in the vibrant waters of the spirit pond. At a glance, the scene was breathtakingly beautiful, akin to a paradise that left no room for impure thoughts. However, gazing at this spectacle, the partially thawed Lu Ziyan fell into silence. Utter silence. The tree monster rather looked more like a divine tree to her. The towering willow tree reached into the clouds, adorned with a misty yet star-like halo. Each willow branch seemed otherworldly, resembling divine chains descending from the heavens. Upon a closer look, she noticed a dazzling 5-color spirit flower amidst the thin veil of mist lingering around the canopy, radiating brilliant hues. A fox monster, 3 to 4 meters long and appearing as an embodiment of flames, lay on another branch, silently resting. The fox monster was extremely beautiful, her beauty transcended racial distinctions. Each strand of her red fur seemed to be bathing in flames. Her eyes, shiny and deep like rubies, were too dazzling to look directly at. It was as if just a mere glance would mesmerize the onlookers. And such a breathtaking fox monster happened to be quietly lying on a branch of the divine tree, seemingly awaiting, yet also cultivating. However, at this moment, as her gaze shifted, Lu Ziyan caught sight of another figure positioned at a height opposite to the fox monster. It appeared snake-like but not quite, dragon-like but not entirely, coiled around a thick branch. Adorning her head was a strange ice-blue ornament resembling dragon horns. Her entire body, white as snow, was covered in palm-sized dragon scales that emitted a faint white glow. Yet this was not the most stunning part. The truly astonishing aspect of this icy blue figure that resembled a snake and dragon was the blue spine on its back. This blue spine seemed to be cast from the coldest ice, faintly shimmering with a hazy blue radiance. At a glance, it appeared mysterious yet terrifying. Is this the legendary tree monster from the rumors? Lu Ziyan muttered to herself, finding it somewhat difficult to accept. According to humans' accounts, the tree monster was supposed to be dark and heinous like a devil, surrounded by a black mist, with branches resembling devilish claws reaching towards the sky. Wasn't it supposed to be heinous and horrifying? So what in the world is this? And not only is it extraordinary, but it is also accompanied by ice and fire spirit beasts. Such a scene left not only her, but even the other Iron Knights who were now fully awake and conscious, utterly dumbfounded. However, this was all thanks to the 5-color spirit flower. She had a natural charm that could not be explained with words alone. If one were to examine the 9 humans behind Lu Ziyan carefully, they would undoubtedly notice a hint of 5-color radiance flickering deep within their eyes. This was the sign of being enchanted. One could almost say that they were already being manipulated by the 5-color spirit flower. Except, compared to before, where the colorful radiance was openly visible in the eyes of the manipulated individuals, this manipulation was more subtle and harder to discern. This not only demonstrated the increasingly refined power of the 5-color spirit flower but also revealed a side that showcased the terrifying nature of her. Silently and stealthily, she had already brought the superhumans under her control. One can imagine how terrifying this was. More importantly, it was also difficult to detect. Just thinking about it made Yuziyu involuntarily narrow his eyes slightly. If used in battle, the enemy commander might not even realize it before being stabbed in the back by the person closest to them. Of course, this was only just one of Yuziyu's ideas. While he did not mind doing such things when necessary, it was unnecessary for now. Despite already knowing the answer in her heart, Lu Ziyan, with more than half of her upper body thawed and surrounded by mist, resembling a girl who had just taken a bath, could not help but ask, "Are you the tree monster?" "If that's what you humans call me, then that's indeed me." A voice, as if echoing from the heart and as refreshing as a spring breeze, resounded in Lu Ziyan's ears. Ah! Slightly stunned, a look of astonishment took over Lu Ziyan's face. She had obviously not expected to receive an answer at this moment. But before she could ask anything else, swoosh! A branch brushed past the bodies of the group of humans at a speed invisible to the naked eye. In an instant, an inexplicable warmth enveloped everyone's bodies, miraculously healing most of their injuries within mere moments. More importantly, their spirits seemed to have been baptized. However, just at this moment, boom, boom, accompanied by heavy footsteps, 3 figures walked out from behind Lu Ziyan. "We pay our respects to the divine tree." The 3 figures knelt on one knee, their postures dignified and earnest. The expressions on their faces were as if they were on a pilgrimage, fanatically looking towards Yuziyu's tree body not far away. You guys. Xiao Bai, Ah Long? In disbelief, Lu Ziyan stared dumbfoundedly at her former companions. As for the 6 members behind Lu Ziyan, their eyes also happened to have widened, seemingly dumbfounded. "A wise bird chooses its tree upon which to perch. I'm only making the right choice." Responding in a cold voice, the young man named Ah Long turned his head, looking back at Lu Ziyan and the others not far away. And at this moment, Lu Ziyan took a good look at Ah Long's expression. It was as cold as ever, just like before. His eyes were clear, with no traces of control, only firmness and passion. What? Stunned, utterly so. However, looking at his determined eyes, Lu Ziyan's heart trembled slightly. But before she could say anything, heavy footsteps approached from behind. Following the sound, she saw a panda she had never seen before, wearing a straw hat and black boots, stepping out of the mist with 3 pandas. "Master! Brother Long!" Excited cries echoed as the 3 pandas, as if finding their dearest person, pounced towards Ah Long and the others successively. "You're here." As familiar as always, Ah Long and his companions bear hugged their mounts. This, however, made Lu Ziyan and the others somewhat difficult to accept. Simply because even their mounts, who were closest to them, had no suspicions about the current condition of the trio. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 382, a cycle of reincarnation. At this moment, what Lu Ziyan and the others were unaware of was that the 5-color spirit flower, hidden far within the crown of Yu Ziyu's tree body, seemed exhausted, and her aura was somewhat languid. "I've reached the limit, 3 is truly the limit. I forcefully invaded their minds without them noticing and modified their wills. Now, their loyalty to you may even be higher than that of the 9 great beasts." Listening to the gasping voice of the 5-color spirit flower, Yu Ziyu was also slightly startled. Forcefully modifying wills? Are you kidding me? However, after a moment, Yu Ziyu's pupils suddenly shrank as he looked through her status screen. He was astonished to discover that there was indeed an extra section on the 5-color spirit flower status screen. Unique abilities, a cycle of reincarnation. It can invade other minds without getting detected and modify their wills. Those whose wills are modified can remember everything from before, even their habits and other aspects will not change. It was an extremely horrifying ability, even if the 5-color spirit flower could execute it in a limited manner. A rough estimate suggested that the next she would be able to execute it would be after several years. Furthermore, the 5-color spirit flower could only cast this ability against enemies whose strength was 1 level lower than that of the 5-color spirit flower. More importantly, it was permanent and irreversible. Now, these 3 humans had completely succumbed to the newly awakened ability of the 5-color spirit flower, a cycle of reincarnation. The instructions planted in their minds by the 5-color spirit flower was of unconditional loyalty to the divine tree, to live and die for it. You used this kind of ability on them? Reading the terrifying description of the ability, Yu Ziyu was also dumbfounded. He had been immersed in cultivation recently and had forgotten to observe the progress of the 5-color spirit flower's cultivation. So, the 5-color spirit flower awakening such an ability really came as a surprise to him. What was even more bewildering to him was that she actually used it on humans. I'm sorry? Momentarily dumbfounded, the 5-color spirit flower also failed to react. Then, she justified in an awkward manner, "This ability can only modify the will of beings 1 tier lower than mine, and it's quite taxing on me. It's a redundant and useless ability. I noticed that you wanted to receive these humans, so I used it on them. I just wanted to help you." Her justification was flawless, causing the corners of Yu Ziyu's eyes to fiercely twitch. This ability could certainly be considered redundant with how limited its uses are. But it can still modify the will of beings 1 tier lower than you. It is really an extremely terrifying ability. In any case, this kind of ability could almost be called the ultimate form of manipulation. Yu Ziyu took a deep breath to calm his turmoil emotions, shaking his head helplessly. Unfortunately, if I had discovered that she had awakened such a terrifying ability earlier, I could have made arrangements in advance. I could have had her modify the wills of extraordinary mutant beasts or humans with remarkable innate talents. While their current cultivation, even if they are a tier lower with their remarkable innate talents, they can nevertheless be cultivated over time. However, just as these thoughts crossed Yu Ziyu's mind, he suddenly froze. I guess I made a mistake. The Iron Knights are the elites among the elite in China, aren't they? Moreover, watching the humans and pandas behave intimately, Yu Ziyu's eyes flickered. I guess it's a buy one get one free offer. In that case, holy shit, I even made a profit. Slightly shaken up, Yu Ziyu regained his spirits. And it's not just that. Turning his gaze slowly towards Lu Ziyan and her teammates behind her, the looks of disbelief on their faces made Yu Ziyu's corner of lips curve up slightly. The next moment, as his glance fell upon the nearby spirit pond, Yu Ziyu started calculating in his mind. Cough, a forceful cough that shook the air interrupted the intimate reunion between the trio with their mounts. The trio slowly turned around, respectfully facing Yu Ziyu along with their mount. Although they were a bit puzzled as to why their masters would be so respectful, the pandas who always obeyed their master, chose to go along with their master's choice this time as well. Since you have chosen to submit, I will not be stingy. Saying this, Yuziyu's branches shook slightly before sweeping towards either side. In a moment, the mist flowed along the branches, creating a path for people to walk through, leading them directly to the spirit pond. What's this? Along was a bit puzzled, nonetheless he still looked towards Yuziyu with fervor and respect. This is the spirit pond. It can cleanse your body and might even raise your strength to a higher level. Just as these words rang in Lu Ziyan and her companion's ears, Along and the other two, along with their respective pandas, started slowly making their way to the spirit pond along the path carved by Yuziyu's branches. However, not long after they stepped into the spirit pond, the thick mist once again blocked Lu Ziyan and the others' line of sight. Nonetheless, they could still make out three figures sitting cross-legged in the spirit pond. Lu Ziyan and the others did not have to wait too long. A deafening roar suddenly echoed through the canyon, and the spiritual energy started seething. Immediately afterward, surging spiritual energy visible to the naked eye, stirred up the surrounding mist, forming vortexes one after another, descending straight onto the heads of Along and the others. Boom, boom, boom. The constantly rising aura made Lu Ziyan and the others' faces change dramatically, finding the sight difficult to digest. 93,000. 95,000. 98,000. Along and the others' aura became increasingly formidable with the rise in their spiritual energy. Not only them, even their mounts, the pandas, had their auras skyrocketing. The spirit pond was made of Yuziyu's life essence, which had been diluted. However, given Yuziyu's current strength, the water in this spirit pond was no less than ordinary Tier 2 spirit water. Since it was Along and the others' first encounter with the spirit pond water, its effects were significantly more effective. Of course, that was not all. Individuals like Along and the others cultivated more arduously than anyone could imagine. Although each of them was at the peak of Tier 1, their bodies were riddled with hidden injuries. And Yuziyu's spirit pond happened to have exceptional healing properties. In just a moment, most of their hidden injuries were already healed. What did this mean? Just the thought of it sent shivers down Lu Ziyan and the others' spine. Shackles, the very shackles that had been hindering their advancement, finally vanished. 5 out of 10 geniuses found it difficult to break through because of the numerous hidden injuries left behind from cultivation and battles. These hidden injuries were hard to detect, making them particularly troublesome. Just like Lu Ziyan's mount Rolipoli was unable to progress further due to the severity of hidden injuries. This was also the prime reason why Lu Ziyan led the team to Misty Mountains, to seek the tree monster's life essence. But now, the life essence that Lu Ziyan and the others were desperately seeking had appeared right before them. Furthermore, it happened to be in the form of the spirit pond's water, slowly but surely mending the hidden injuries of their former teammates. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 383, The Legendary Night. At this moment, the corners of Yuziyu's lips suddenly curled up slightly, as if discovering something. About to break through, huh? Muttering, Yuziyu picked a small piece of black substance from his canopy. It was a piece of Tier 3 mutant octopus heart. Although it was just a small piece, it contained immense energy, enough to help this knight break through. Of course, Yuziyu still had plenty of these pieces. They were a top-level strategic resource of the Misty Mountains. If utilized properly, they could create many Tier 2 transcendents. Now, with a gentle sweep of his branch, Yuziyu threw the small piece of black substance into Along's mouth. Eat it. Hearing Yuziyu's orders, Along obeyed without a shred of hesitation. Additionally, a powerful sense of craving surged throughout his body. Exhaling a long, deep breath, the knight named Along opened his mouth and swallowed the black substance. However, before he could chew, it melted into his mouth right away, bursting into a torrent of energy. Boom! In just a moment, Along felt the spiritual energy in his body boiling like never before, and even the vortex of spiritual energy around him expanded rapidly. This can't be, can it? He's breaking through, how is that possible? Lu Ziyan and the others' cries of shock and surprise echoed one after another, and their expression changed drastically at the sight of this. A trace of envy flickered in the depths of some Iron Knight's eyes. Tier 2 was a familiar yet distant realm. For some, it might just be a higher level, but for knights like them, it was synonymous to strength. If they became Tier 2 superhumans, they would undoubtedly surpass most ordinary Tier 2 superhumans. With the right opportunities, they might even leap to become apex superhumans in China. Apex superhumans, that would be on the same level as Empress Ling Er and the strongest Iron Knight, standing shoulder to shoulder with them. This level did not correspond to cultivation, it was the division of combat power. Just like Empress Ling Er, although her spiritual energy was only around 700,000, her combat power far exceeded others' imagination. As for the most mysterious and strongest Iron Knight, thanks to his mount, the Panda y Dragon Slayer, and their tacit cooperation with exquisite combat skills, he could be considered the strongest among Tier 2 superhumans. Compared to other professions, the path of a knight was long and arduous. After all, they were not alone but shared life and death with their mounts. If their mount made the slightest misstep, it may affect themselves. This was what the knights called a knight's bond. It was a testament to their trust with their mount. While their mount could potentially drag them down due to this bond, the benefits were also numerous. For instance, the combat power, as the most elite human partnering with a royal beast like the panda, it was not simple 1+1. In addition to a direct increase in their combat power, they would also sense something along with their partner's breakthroughs. Just like now, Along's mount, the panda storm scale, was also showing signs of breakthrough due to Along's breakthrough. Wah! Storm scale let out a bleat as the mist started surging, and the terrifying spiritual vortex expanded rapidly, visible to the naked eye. It was unbelievable and also unimaginable. And not long after that. Thump, 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 accompanied by heavy footsteps, two figures slowly walked out from the depths of the mist. One was a human with his upper body completely bare, revealing a well-built and muscular physique. Every muscle on his body resembled a coiling dragon, distinctly showcasing the extent of his physical strength. Each of his steps sent tremors through the ground and shockwaves through the air. Even the ground caved in as if struggling to bear his weight. As for the figure beside him, it was a tall and robust panda on all fours, with a pair of eyes radiating chilling ferocity and brutality. What left a deep impression was that this panda bore a scar on its face, and half of its white fur happened to be dyed red. The red and black hair complemented each other, bringing out a fierce aura around it, rendering it incredibly intimidating. They were none other than Along and his panda storm scale. Compared to how they were when they entered earlier, they had undoubtedly undergone a huge transformation. Just the fierce aura emanating from them made everyone feel suffocated. Not to mention Lu Ziyan and the others, even Sarcosuchus and White Tiger in the distance, had their pupils shrunk at the sight of this pair. This was simply unbelievable to them. Not that long ago they were just Tier 1 superhumans, ordinary and hard to notice in an order of knights. However, now, after completing the breakthrough, they seemed to have become the dazzling hot sun, attracting the attention of everyone present. The auras of human and beast were in complete harmony and resonating. Along possessed a fiery temperament, and in his fierceness, there was a tinge of determination. He had always been the first to charge in the lance of Iron Knights led by Lu Ziyan. And so was his mount, Storm Scale. And now, with their breakthroughs, this aura of theirs has been magnified exponentially. More beastly than any creature, marked by fierce brutality and cruelty. Growl, Storm Scale, now several times larger than before, let out a growl that actually left ripples in the air. The ripples were so powerful that they even caused nearby trees to bend. Even Lu Ziyan and the others, standing at a distance, appeared as if under a spell, their expressions completely frozen. We pay our respects to Divine Tree. Firm and resounding voices echoed through the sky. The robust man named Along was already kneeling on the ground, looking at Yuziyu with eyes full of reverence and devotion. His mount, Storm Scale, had also tacitly lowered its head in a show of respect. And Yuziyu nodded slightly, his eyes flickering with a hint of surprise. It really came as a surprise to him. At first he had not taken them seriously, but now, Yuziyu discovered that the knight profession seemed to be formidable. They were more than just companions. Both human and beast were a single entity, their auras in perfect harmony and resonating. Not only that, Yuziyu even discovered that Along also had acquired some abilities of the pandas. For instance, unique ability, elemental resistance, capable of resisting elemental attacks to some extent, possessing 30% of his mount's resistance. The resistance to various elements is also determined by the panda's various elemental resistances. As a knight combination, the long-term companionship made the knight and the mount a single entity. And during breakthroughs, the knights also had a certain chance of gaining individual abilities of their mounts. And now, Ah Long has gained the most formidable talent of the pandas. Although it only had a 30% effect, when combined with the knight's own strength, it became hard to quantify. No wonder a top-tier knight pair was hailed as one of the strongest professions in the previous era. Evolution begins with a big tree. Chapter 384, letting one go without absolute control is not an option. One of the strongest professions was indeed a heavy title. In the previous era, when cultivation was at its peak, there was a flourishing of a myriad of professions. To emerge as one of the strongest professions among so many options speaks volumes about the terror of such a vocation. Of course, the strength of a profession depended on the individual himself. In the case of Ah Long and his panda, one was an elite among humans, and the other was a recognized mutant beast from a royal clan. The overall combat power of their combination was far from a simple addition of their strengths. However, if the panda was replaced with an ordinary mutant wild horse or buffalo, the outcome would be different. In the worst-case scenario, they might end up dragging each other down, becoming weak links and hindering each other's progress. When both parties lack strength, it becomes challenging to achieve any significant success. Strength and unity made their knight team more terrifying. That was the true mystery of the knight's profession. Therefore, every knight aspired to find a steed capable of carrying their ambitions. Some even set their sights on legendary species like the wyvern that had recently advanced in Australia. Of course, that was just a desire. Becoming a knight was not as simple as just finding a steed. They had to eat together, live together, dress together, cultivate together. They had to do everything together, until their spiritual energy could merge together as if they were one. This was the hardest part of being a knight. Indeed, it was challenging, but if successful, the rewards were equally amazing. Like Ah Long and his mount, Stormscale, who had just undergone a breakthrough, their combined combat power was nothing short of terrifying. If Tier 2 Transcendence were categorized based on combat power, then the current Ah Long and his mount together could be considered of second order, perhaps even approaching third order. First order included ordinary Tier 2 Transcendence. Although they could be considered powerful, their combat power would be of ordinary Tier 2 mutant wild horse, mutant spider, and the like. In other words, any human or mutant beast that managed to advance to Tier 2 would be at this level. Second order encompassed beings like the mutant white tiger, who relied on their terrifying race and personal mutations to possess strength far beyond the ordinary Tier 2 Transcendence. As for third order, it would include creatures like bull demon and whalefall, creatures whose races were inherently already strong and they individually possessed strange power over forces like gravitational force and ultrasonic waves. If they went all out, they could easily lay siege to cities. As for fourth order, only creatures like Brewmaster and Ninetails could be in it. Possessing strength beyond measure, they could already compete with the 10 monstrosities of the continent. The strongest entities recognized by China also fell in the fourth order. Except, compared to Brewmaster and Ninetails, the strength of Empress Ling Air was even more unfathomable. However, without resorting to exceptional means, it would be a challenging task for Ling Air to take down Brewmaster and Ninetails. They might even be cautious of each other because of their innate talents and abilities. For instance, if Brewmaster strengthened his defenses, Ninetails would find it challenging to deal with him. However, when faced with Ling Air's flames that could burn souls, Brewmaster would have no choice but to step back. This was mutual restraint. As for China's strongest Iron Knight, although his combat power put him in fourth order, the specifics of his combat power remained a mystery. However, it should not be that scary, at least not stronger than Ninetails and Brewmaster by much. Otherwise, with his strength, he would not have been struggling to suppress a murder of crows along the coastal area, one of the 10 monstrosities of the continent. Of course, many factors affected one's combat power, such as the amount of spiritual energy, physical strength, innate talent, unique abilities, and even divine abilities. It could not be generalized, it could only be seen as a reference. As in the case of Golden Ant, thanks to his fearsome innate talent, and under the premise that he had ample spiritual energy, it would not be difficult for him to join the ranks of Apex Tier 2 Transcendence. Unfortunately, it had not been that long since Golden Ant had broken through to Tier 2. Whether it was his spiritual energy or physical strength, they had not reached their peaks. Observing the tall figure not far away standing next to the fierce Stormscale, Yuziu nodded in satisfaction. The harvest was indeed substantial, a rare opportunity for him. If these knights were properly nurtured, they might have the potential to rival the strongest Iron Knight, and even contend for the apex rank. Such strength in the present era would be enough to rule over a territory. At this moment, as if recalling something, Wuxia shifted his gaze to the 7 figures behind Along. Your time is limited. I'll give you one night to choose, either submit or face destruction. Submit, and you might even have the chance to reach Tier 2 just like Along. Just as he mentioned this, with a thunderous roar, Along tacitly let loose his formidable aura. In the blink of an eye, at a speed visible to the naked eyes, a blood-color vortex was formed. A smile appeared on Wuxia's lips, feeling quite satisfied with Along's tactful behavior. Afterwards, he glanced at Lu Ziyan and others, his tone turning one notch colder as he stated, "As for the second option, I hope you think carefully." Wuxia did not add anything else. As far as he was concerned, this was a simple thing for him. According to Ling Er, the most noteworthy among this group is Lu Ziyan. As one of the 7 commanders of the Iron Knights, she is exceptionally talented. If she were to die here or even join our ranks, it would definitely deal a significant blow to China. It should be brought to notice that Ling Er had already provided detailed information on Lu Ziyan. She had no mother or father, an orphan. Her only mentor had tried to challenge the surging dark currents in the Chinese government. After having failed in the struggle, he was exiled along the coast, where he eventually perished, fending off the invasion of mutant sea creatures during the Dark Day. In a sense, because of her mentor, Lu Ziyan harbored resentment towards certain individuals in the government, and those people were well aware of this. However, due to her innate talent, most of them hesitated to take action. However, several months ago, due to her mount's injuries, Lu Ziyan's cultivation had come to a halt. Since then, she lost most of her influence, and thanks to the intervention of certain individuals, her status had taken a dive overnight. In other words, she was a pitiable girl with a tragic background. If this aspect was exploited well, regaining control wouldn't be difficult. After all, compared to anything else and even China, Lu Ziyan's only concern was her mount, Rolipoli. It was her emotional support and her only source of support. Otherwise, she would not have risked her life for Rolipoli's injuries. What Wuxia had to do here was to heal her mount. With this in mind, Wuxia cast a deep glance into the depths of the thick fog at the leading panda, which bore very serious hidden injuries. Let's wait a bit longer. Wuxia smiled in his heart, choosing not to act immediately. Such matters shouldn't be rushed. It would be best if Lu Ziyan took the initiative and made a choice herself. Only then can her loyalty be somewhat credible. As for the others, whether they pledged allegiance or not, Wuxia was not too concerned. Whether they lived and died depended on their choice. There was no third option. In Wuxia's opinion, letting them go without absolute control over them was not an option. Even if these people chose to pledge allegiance, Wuxia would still keep some sort of backup plan in case they decided to go back on their words. Furthermore, as far as they were concerned, whether they refused to submit or hesitated after one night, a thunderous strike from Wuxia would be the consequence awaiting them all. When dealing with enemies, Wuxia showed no mercy. If they were of no use, Wuxia did not bother about them. The reason Wuxia paid some attention to Lu Ziyan was simply that she had demonstrated her own value. It was as simple as that. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 385, Night of the Mist. In the darkness of the night, time quietly passed. The night had passed in the blink of an eye. However, in a small corner of Misty Mountains, it felt like a year had passed. Faintly, the backs of several people were covered in sweat. They were Iron Knights who had determination exceeding the imagination of ordinary people. However, the sudden betrayal of 3 of their most trusted comrades had left them shaken. Worse was Long and Stormscale's subsequent breakthroughs to Tier 2, which had left them further shocked. Submission meant prosperity, refusal meant no chance of seeing the light of another day. Drawing long deep breaths, the knights looked towards the short-haired girl leaning against a large tree not far away with complex eyes. Now, all the knights were waiting for the knight commander to make the final decision. In the past, they would have never believed that their commander Lu would hesitate, even if they were beaten to death. They were not afraid of death, they were ready to face any kind of challenge before them, even death. However, thinking about the unfair treatment from the government, and recalling the humiliation Commander Lu had suffered, they fell silent. In the absence of any comparison, all kinds of adversity, even death was nothing. However, once comparison entered the picture, once there was another choice, the so-called persistence became meaningless. No one knew how long had passed since this small corner of the canyon had fallen into complete silence. However, just at this moment, a voice suddenly rang in everyone's mind: either submit or get destroyed. The voice was plain and devoid of any emotion, just indifferent from beginning to end. However, for some reason, the knights, who possessed staunch will and determination, could not help but tremble upon hearing that voice, even their fist clenched up involuntarily. At this point, they came to realize the terrifying aspect of the tree monster. It was not just strong, but it was also skilled at manipulating hearts. But just then, tap, 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 with heavy footsteps, the short-haired girl leaning against the large tree in the distance started walking forward. She did not utter a single word and maintained a cold look on her face. However, her actions spoke louder than words. 2 meters. 10 meters. In the blink of an eye, her desolate and slender figure had mostly disappeared into the dense fog. However, watching this disappearing figure, the remaining 6 knights exchanged glances. Then 2 of them also stepped up. "I just want to follow the commander," seemingly explaining, but the gaze of the 2 was as resolute as ever. "I understand." The remaining knights nodded their understanding, but they remained completely still, as steady as Mount Tai. And just a moment later, as if one of the knights remembered something, he suddenly reminded, "Take care of the commander." As the words fell, the 2 knights who had stepped forward trembled slightly. But before they could respond, another familiar voice rang in their ears again: "We won't go. We leave the rest to you guys. Oh, and if you ever become enemies with the country in the future, remember to show mercy. That is, after all, our homeland." It sounded as if he was entrusting them, but the voice was full of laughter and relief. As far as this night was concerned, it was a nightmarish night. Now it has finally come to an end. He would not blame the choices of his former comrades. Every person had their own choices. Just like how 4 of them were willing to die. Just like how the 2 were willing to follow Commander Lu. They were all choices. At the moment when the 4 knights finished speaking, a strange sound echoed in the mist. Crack, crack, crack. Along with this sound, a layer of white frost gradually began to appear on the ground. In just a few moments, the temperature of the surroundings dropped dramatically. At this moment, if one were to look in the direction of the 4 knights, they would notice a layer of frost gathering over the ground in all directions, with them at the center, and ultimately converging towards them. They did not mount any resistance or displayed any struggle. Even in the face of this kind of extreme cold, these 4 knights very sensibly chose to wait. One of them even struck a pose, clasping the long spear in his arms, with a proud expression. Meanwhile, witnessing their 4 close companions gradually frozen into ice sculptures, the 2 knights could not help but gnash their teeth as a complex and painful expression took over their faces. At this moment they could not say anything. However, just then, a gentle voice echoed in their hearts. "You made the right choice." Speaking up to this point, Wuxia momentarily paused before continuing, "However, they also have a chance." Chance. As if hearing something unbelievable, one of the knights couldn't help but exclaim in excitement. "Yes, a chance." Nodding, Wuxia straightforwardly stated, "I've just frozen them here, they're still very much alive. If you contribute enough to Misty Mountains, I don't mind releasing them. But remember, they can remain frozen like this for half a year at most. If they are not thawed within half a year, all that awaits them is a complete necrosis of their bodies, and the collapse of their consciousness." At this point, Wuxia could not help but curl up his lips into a smirk. Compared to pure manipulation, this method was even more terrifying. Although there were threats and coercion in his words, these 2 knights, and even the one silently standing in the thick fog, staring at the frozen figures, had no choice but to compromise. Even within half a year, they would spare no effort to fight for Misty Mountains, just to make enough contributions. One thing noteworthy here was that Lu Ziyan had long expected this outcome. During the night, Wuxia had been talking to her, albeit casually. Yet, he completely broke down her last line of defense. Her companions were safeguarded, and her partner, Rolipoli, would gain a chance of recovery. As far as she was concerned, these outcomes were the best she could hope for. However, it was regrettable that Lu Ziyan seemed to have lost the ability to speak. Her entire being had become a whole lot colder. Perhaps this was the price she willingly paid for choosing to submit, abandoning words and proving everything through actions. The complexity of the human heart is indeed fascinating. Staring at the four figures that had turned into ice sculptures in the distance, the five-color spirit flower rooted on Yuziyu could not help but give out a deep sigh. Indeed, Yuziyu also admitted with a nod. Afterward, he generously added, "However, these people are indeed true knights." "True knights?" the five-color spirit flower murmured, a bit confused. "They know how to make their decision." Saying this, Yuziyu could not help but turn his gaze towards the direction of the capital. Fortunately, there are only 100 or so knights like this. Otherwise it would indeed be a bit troublesome. Still, the current situation isn't bad either. Including the 3 knights led by Along, and these 3 knights led by Lu Ziyan, we have a total of 6 knights. If cultivated properly, they can become a symbol of Misty Mountains. As for whether they would betray, Yuziyu was not particularly concerned about this. Firstly, Yuziyu was not planning for them to go against their country, China. Secondly, because their 4 companions happened to be sealed in ice in Misty Mountains, which served as a shackle that bound them tightly to Misty Mountains. And after half a year, even if they exchanged their contributions for their companions' freedom, could they do anything by then? The entire China, even the entire human race, would already know them as the Knights of the Mist. Traitors that originally belonged to one of the legendary special forces of China. At that time, the vast China would be disgraced. As such, these knights would be left with any choice but to remain with Misty Mountains. Wise men do not believe in rumors, but wise men were few and far between. Moreover, in the eyes of the Chinese government, regardless of the reason, these knights did choose betrayal. Even if they made it in the face of inexplicable difficulties, everyone would only see the bitter cold reality before their eyes. Evolution begins with a big tree, chapter 386, onwards to the western desert. In the early morning. "Master, are you planning to go out?" Suddenly, a voice echoed in Yuziyu's ear. Looking in the direction of the sound, Yuziyu found 9 tails, lying on a branch, looking at him with anticipation. "And?" Yuziyu affirmed with a slight nod, and then straightforwardly stated and also admitted, "It's about time to go out and train a few little ones along the way." Saying this, Yuziyu looked at a nearby spot, where a wolf as big as a calf with 2 heads, was playing in the spirit pond. This wolf was none other than Lupin, one of the 3 most amazing deformed young creatures with extraordinary innate talent of Misty Mountains. Slytherin accompanied Whale Fall to the sea. Oris had been trained by Golden Monkey, so there was no need to worry about him. As for Lupin, he can only be well cultivated by Yuziyu. In addition to Lupin, Yuziyu also intended to bring along Old Fifth, Golden Ant, an unruly and stubborn little guy who needed to be carefully trained. After all, they were among the few creatures of Misty Mountains with the potential to become apex Tier 2 transcendents. It would be a pity if they took a wrong turn. As these thoughts swirled in Yuziyu's mind, he became even more determined to go out. Traveling was just the secondary goal, the prime focus of the trip was cultivation. At this moment, sensing the expectant gaze of the 9 tails, Yuziyu could not help but smile. "I didn't forget you. I knew it, Master is the best." Giving a charming smile, 9 tails retreated to a branch again, choosing to immerse herself in cultivation. For her, besides chatting with her master, the greatest pleasure was cultivation. She was truly fascinated by the gradual increase in her strength. At this moment, watching the 9 tails immersed in cultivation, Yuziyu did not disturb her either. At this moment he had more important things at hand. "Ha?" Yuziyu exhaled a long deep breath as the mist around him suddenly seethed violently. Then, visible to the naked eye, a ripple spread around Yuziyu, clearing away the mist in all directions as if blown away by the wind. At the same time, just like a god's eye view, the entire Misty Mountains shrouded in mist appeared in Yuziyu's vision. The mist was Yuziyu's eyes. Thanks to the mist, he can easily perceive every nook and corner covered by the mist. Now, after a long absence, he was ready to bring the entire Misty Mountains back under his full control. Boom! Yuziyu's mind slightly shook as clear images appeared in his mind. He saw a white tiger grooming his fur on a peak. A troop of chimpanzees training diligently deep underground. More importantly, they were not ordinary mutant chimpanzees, they were the royals among the mutant chimpanzees, King Kongs. They possessed astonishing physiques far beyond those of ordinary mutant chimpanzees, and were also larger in size. Among them, the chimpanzee king had reached a staggering height of 30 meters. Last night, under the leadership of the chimpanzee king, many King Kongs came to greet Yuziyu in an orderly manner. These guys are indeed diligent. Watching each of them executing movements beyond the limit in the bull demon's gravity field, Wuxia could not help but admire. Not to mention anything else, just the training they were doing made the mutant chimpanzee clan deserving of being the most formidable clan in Misty Mountains. To defend the honor of their race, they were indeed quite dedicated. It should be noted that many social species in Misty Mountains have elected leaders and formed communities. Wuxia had left such matters to Sarcosuchus, who lived up to his expectations and handled all of them in an organized manner. Among them, the mutant chimpanzees clan was recognized as the strongest clan. Perhaps there were species with individual combat power far greater than them, such as the tiger clan, but they could not compete with the sheer number of the chimpanzee clan. Perhaps there were species with populations far greater than the chimpanzee clan, such as the mutant rat clan, but they couldn't challenge the elite status of the chimpanzee clan. This was due to the fact that the entire chimpanzee clan consisted of transcendents, with their leader being a Tier 2 transcendent. In light of this, their title of the strongest clan of Misty Mountains remained unshakable. Perhaps, in the depths of the North Pole, the polar bear clan under the lightning giant bear might challenge them in the future, but for now it was highly unlikely. Because of the fact that the mutant chimpanzee clan had undergone a qualitative transformation after an extended period of training. Even Wuxia could not help but admit this fact. He also believed that very soon the chimpanzee clan, bearing the title of strongest clan of Misty Mountains, would enter the limelight and give the entire world a huge surprise. Observing this, Wuxia nodded his acknowledgement, satisfied. I had to admit, the current Misty Mountains is developing in the right direction. The Rat Clan, Spider Clan, Wild Boar Clan, Storm Wolf Clan, and other major clans were distributed in all directions, guarding Misty Mountains. In addition to guarding Misty Mountains, these major clans would also team up at certain times to venture outside Misty Mountains. Sometimes to hunt in order to replenish their food supply, or to search for spirit herbs and flowers to the treasure trove within Misty Mountains in exchange for merits. It could be said that relying on these clans, the influence of Misty Mountains was expanding visibly at an eye-catching speed. I guess I can go out without worrying for a while. Wuxia smiled, feeling very satisfied. He was very pleased looking at the current state of Misty Mountains. Moreover, as if thinking of something, Wuxia's corners of lips suddenly curled up as he gently called out, "Lung Feng." Just as these words echoed, a figure in all black walked out from the mist. "Greetings, divine tree." And, nodding slightly, Wuxia also asked the question in his mind, "Is the information accurate?" At the words, the lean and slender figure Lung Feng suddenly smiled, assuring, "Very accurate." Immediately after, Lung Feng's face turned cold as he added in an ice-cold voice, "This information has been verified multiple times at the expense of countless sacrifices made by the Rat Clan under Shady's command." "I see," muttering, Wuxia's face turned a little darker. He did not expect the Rat Clan to have made such great sacrifices. Although the Rat Clan's size was quite terrifying, losing thousands at once was still a significant blow. The Rat Clan deserves great merit. In a simple response, Wuxia affirmed the contribution of the Rat Clan. The great credit here referred to the contribution they made to Misty Mountains. In Misty Mountains, every deed was categorized into small and major merits, different levels and different contributions. As for the Rat Clan, the reason they were awarded with great merit was because they had discovered a medium-sized fire tribute spirit stone mine in some corner of the western desert. Their discovery and sacrifice undoubtedly made them eligible for great merit. However, at this moment, as if thinking of something, the corner of Wuxia's mouth curled up and he sneered, "It just so happens that I've been planning to go out. The western desert happens to be the perfect destination." Saying this, Wuxia's gazed towards the west as his eyes flickered with a cold gleam. He wanted to see for himself how dangerous the western desert really was. Sylvan, changing terms family, tribe, clan, pack-clan for consistency. It's nice to differentiate the terms, but honestly, some of the groups are small and some are really big. Calling them the generic term of clan seems more suitable. They are also written in reference to an army formation. I found it weird when the MC says strongest clan, when the chimpanzees' group is called a tribe. Well, just my unpopular opinion, I suppose. Just wanted to give me 2 cents on why I changed it this way. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 387, The Great Desert, Hellish Training. The Western Desert, also known as the Taklamakan Desert, has been a vast stretch of desert since ancient times. However, after the advent of the era of transcendence, it had turned into a treacherous land. Though, even before ancient times, the Taklamakan Desert was known as the Sea of Death, meaning it was a place where once one entered, they could not come out. Thus, one could imagine how terrifying the Taklamakan Desert became in this era of spiritual energy resurgence, where everyone and everything was evolving. Swoosh, ferocious winds relentlessly blew across the desert, lifting up sand dozens of meters high. However, under the setting sun, a closer look at the sand would reveal a subtle tint of bloody red, marring the golden yellow landscape. And this was not an illusion, because a subtle yet nauseating smell of blood also lingered in the air. Looking up at the sky, a round sun hung at the edge of the desert, casting a dark and deep hue over the land, painting the desert red. The sand dunes under the setting sun seemed like frozen waves of the sea, creating the impression of a dark red sea in a slumber. This was the Taklamakan Desert, where many creatures had been buried under the sand. An extremely treacherous land. Compared to the North Pole and Yangtze River, the sand in the Taklamakan Desert seemed as if soaked in blood. Let alone venturing it, the flying sand would riddle ordinary people with holes like bullets. Although comparing the sand to bullets might be an exaggeration in case of a real sandstorm, the sand was even more terrifying than bullets. They could reduce an enormous mutant beast into a pile of bones in just a few seconds. In other words, without some special means, it was almost impossible to survive in the Taklamakan Desert. And now, boom boom boom. Accompanied by terrifying tremors, 8 to 9 figures appeared at the distant horizon, braving the flying sand. Roar, roar, roar. The next moment, one roar after another reverberated through the desert, shaking everything within a radius of several kilometers. Countless creatures hidden beneath the sand could not help but shiver, instinctively curling up. The fierceness of these roars and the murderous aura accompanying them was beyond what ordinary mutant beasts could handle. Even at a distance, the roars made one's soul tremble, a testament to the terrifying nature of their owners. If one looked closely at these 8 to 9 figures, they would notice that most of them were galloping through the desert on all fours, like a quadruped animal. However, the most notable of them were the 2 figures in the middle. One figure that stood out, adorned in black and red fur that sharply contrasted, accompanied by a fierce scar etched across its face. At a glance, it exuded an intimidating presence. It was a panda, and a very fearsome one at that. Sitting atop the panda was a figure with short hair, radiating an extremely cold aura. The other was also another panda carrying a figure. However, this panda is a bit smaller, adorned with fur as white as jade and a faint contrast of black. This was none other than Rolipoli. Except, compared to a few days ago, the current Rolipoli had a much more terrifying aura. Especially the uncanny gleam in the depths of his eyes, which made people involuntarily raise their guards. On the back of Rolipoli was naturally a short-haired girl. To call them short was not entirely accurate, because they had now grown to her shoulders. Soaking in the spirit pond was akin to a baptism. Not only did it heal most of her hidden injuries, but even her appearance had undergone some changes. The current Lu Ziyan was as fair as snow, and had shoulder-length black hair. Her pupils were also different from before. They were now jade green in color, the same as her mount, Rolipoli. It was because she had gained Rolipoli's ability after Rolipoli had broken through. Unique ability, Mirror of the Soul. The jade green eyes can see through all the subtle movements of the opponent, and to a certain extent, can perceive the flow of spiritual energy. It was quite a terrifying ability. Combined with Lu Ziyan's superb martial arts, her combat power had risen significantly. Ordinary people could not even withstand a blow from her, let alone face her in combat. She was Ziyan, the deputy commander of Misty Mountain's infamous Knights of Mist. The only one who could stand side by side with her was naturally Ah Long, also Tier 2 Knight. The two of them were riding their respective pandas, galloping through the swirling sand. Right behind them were 4 Tier 1 Knights riding their pandas side by side. However, that was not all. If one paid close attention to the vicinity of these knights, he or she would notice other mutant beasts on either side of them. One was none other than Lupin, the 2-headed wolf, now carrying Golden Ant, sprinting with all his might. On the other side happened to be a mutant snow leopard as white as snow, panting heavily. On his head was a palm-sized mutant mantis standing still. "Hurry up, your endurance is much worse than theirs," shouting in an iron-willed voice, a green willow branch repeatedly whipped Lupin and Snow Leopard. Crack, crack, accompanied by a crisp snap, a pain shot through Lupin and Snow Leopard's body, causing their slowing down speed to increase once again. However, battered and exhausted as they were, they failed to notice a tinge of green quietly seeping into their bodies when the willow branch whipped them. The sight of 8 figures galloping ahead through the vast desert brought a smile. Despite all its dangers, Wuxia could not help but admire the beauty of the desert. The sight of the setting sun on the horizon, reminiscent of a sunset over a long river, and the sand gracefully lifting off the dune tips like smoke, nothing can surpass these. However, compared to Wuxia's satisfied mood, an upheaval of emotions raced in Lupin and Snow Leopard's hearts. 3 days they'd been galloping for 3 days straight. Even with their robust bodies, they were on their last leg. The pandas, on the other hand, were all fiercer than iron. Their stamina was made for endurance, especially for Rolipoli and Stormscale, who had advanced to Tier 2. They did not look tired or out of breath at all. Compared to them, Lupin and Snow Leopard, who were not good at long-distance trekking, were completely flabbergasted. If it were not for the inexplicable force surging from the depths of their bodies every time they were exhausted, they would probably have collapsed long ago. Nevertheless, Lupin and Snow Leopard were on the verge of collapse. If it were not for a willow tree over 10 meters tall following right behind them, they would have given up long ago. "Master, is it really okay for you to do this?" With a smile, Nine Tails, who was walking on the air beside Wuxia and churning waves of flames, suddenly turned her head and asked curiously. "Better than okay." Wuxia mischievously laughed as his branches danced gently, seemingly expressing his joyful mood. However, it made sense. Wuxia had always dreamt of pulling out his roots and running under the setting sun, which he had now realized most of it. So, how could he not be happy? As for Lupin and Snow Leopard, they were definitely not going to die from exhaustion. After all, they were being secretly taken care of by Wuxia from time to time. He would always secretly infuse his lashes with life essence. It would rather be strange if anything happened to them. And compared to their fatigue, this was the real training. Only through such hellish training could they make further progress and go beyond their limits. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 388, The Transformation of Knights. Boom, 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 rows after rows of fearsome beasts swarmed towards Wuxia's group, kicking up endless sand. This was the Taklamakan Desert, the most treacherous place on the continent. In the absence of Along and Ziyan's Tier 2 aura, some would always become overconfident and rear their heads. Chirp! Suddenly a cry echoed from a nearby sand dune, followed by continuous tremors, one after another. But right then, a glimpse of coldness flickered in the depths of Ziyan's eyes, who was quietly standing on the back of Rolipoli. In an instant, her feet kicked Rolipoli's back before she leaped into the air with a lance in her hand, reaching a height of 30 to 40 meters. Immediately after, she fiercely thrust her lance as a cold halo radiated from the tip of the lance. Asterisk swoosh, accompanied by loud swoosh, Ziyan, like a meteor, zoomed towards the ground at a 45-degree angle, stabbing into the sand dune. Immediately afterward, a splash of blood shot out from the sand, dyeing the sand red. At the same time, chirp, a painful cry echoed through the air. However, before the cry could linger in the air for long, cold words emerged from Ziyan's lips as the spiritual energy at the tip of her lance erupted, "Go to hell." Like a bomb explosion, a shockwave of spiritual energy spread outwards, kicking up the sand high into the air. Killed in one blow, impressive. Wuxia gave a nod in amazement as he looked towards the 11 to 12 meters long desert monitor lizard amidst the sandstorm, his lips curling into a smile. Ziyan, this girl is indeed packing formidable combat power. She might appear as tiny as an ant before him, but she had shown remarkable speed, fierceness, and accuracy when dealing with these mutant beasts that were only at Tier 1. Especially looking at the lance that had pierced half of the desert monitor lizard's head, Wuxia could not help but raise an eyebrow. Even until now, the lance was still vibrating at a fearsome frequency. It was a testament to the level of shock the desert monitor lizard, with half of its brain pierced, had to endure. However, at this moment, as if thinking of something, Wuxia promptly sprang to action. With a swish, a green streak of light flashed through the air, like a spirit snake shooting out of its cage. Immediately after, a cold and electronic prompt rang in Wuxia's mind. Ding, you have killed a Tier 1 Transcendent Desert Monitor Lizard, evolution points plus 50,000. Wuxia slightly nodded, feeling satisfied. The transcendent mutant beast possessed quite a tenacious vitality. Even with half of its head destroyed, it was still breathing. As such, Yuziyu did not hesitate to make the final harvest. Got another batch of points? Smiling, Yuziyu channeled his spiritual energy. In an instant, the green branches that had pierced the body of Desert Monitor Lizard trembled slightly. Boom! With a deafening explosion, swathes of blood splashed into the air as large chunks of flesh shot in all directions. Without a moment of hesitation or delay, the pandas leaped towards the scattered pieces of flesh in different directions, smelling the blood. Not only them but even Lupin, Snow Leopard, and the others in the rear also shot towards the pieces of flesh. These pieces of flesh happened to be the meal of mutant beasts and humans alike. In this harsh environment, even eating raw meat was a luxury. The knights, who had firm wills, naturally did not mind it. With a flick of their lances, a small piece of flesh fell into their hands, and more pieces of flesh fell into the mouths of the pandas under them. Even the tall and beautiful Ziyen grabbed a small piece of flesh with her right hand that was enveloped in green spiritual energy and gently brought it into her mouth. While it was a bloody sight, there was a certain elegance to it. Especially the drop of blood not yet wiped off the corner of her lips added a touch of inexplicable charm. Throughout the journey, the pandas, even Lupin and the others, never stopped their march towards the depths of the desert. In a neat and tidy manner. Enacting strict obedience. A disciple stricter than the army was vividly demonstrated by them. However, that was not the scariest part. The most frightening aspect was their silence, akin to cold-blooded war machines, silent and ominous. This was exactly what Yuziyu hoped to see. As knights, their duty was to attack. They did not need to use words, their lances spoke for them. The lances in their hands proved everything more than what meaningless words could. At this moment, as if thinking of something, Yuziyu slowly switched his gaze to a palm-sized spirit flower rooted on a branch in his canopy. Tired? No, the five-color spirit flower softly replied, but her voice carried a tinge of inexplicable fatigue. Get some rest, don't push yourself. Yuziyu used his branch to gently stroke the petals of the five-color spirit flower. Her current state made him a bit distressed. The decisiveness and determination shown by the Lance of Knights owe much to the five-color spirit flower. After all, she was cleaning their mind and polishing their wills using her spiritual energy every now and then. Even China could not provide such treatment. Not to mention, Yuziyu also intentionally or unintentionally infused his life essence into the pieces of flesh provided to everyone. It could be said that these knights had undergone a metamorphosis in just a few days, surpassing their past selves. Not only in willpower but also in physical strength. Even their cultivation had increased significantly. And this happened to be one of the most terrifying aspects of Misty Mountains. Yuziyu provided resources and treatment that ordinary people dare not even think of. The cleansing of the psyche, conducted by a marvelous flower of heaven and earth, and the life essence of a half-step Tier 4 spirit tree, these unique and precious resources were potent enough to turn a pig into a powerful entity, let alone these knights who possessed remarkable talent and strength. Yuziyu believes that by the time they return, the entire human race and even mutant beasts would look at them with an entirely new gazes. However, before that, what awaits them would be one bloody battle after another. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 389, an encounter with the Scorpion Tide. Kill! A thunderous shout, akin to a peal of thunder, reverberated through the sky. Immediately after, a massive figure covered in blood leaped into the air, causing the swarm to back up. However, covered in blood, a long, riding storm scale charged straight towards the mutant Scorpion Tide without a moment of hesitation. Yuziyu's group was facing the mutant Scorpion Tide. At this moment, thousands upon thousands of basketball-sized black scorpions were emerging from the ground, pushing apart the layers of sand. Skitter, skitter. Skitter, skitter. Skitter, skitter. Amidst creepy sounds, the mutant black scorpions rushed towards the knights under Yuziyu's command, resembling black waves. Except, compared to the ferocity of these mutant scorpions, the knights and mutant beasts led by Ziyen and Along like a sharp sword cut straight into the black tide with unstoppable momentum. Wah! Along's mount, Stormscale, growled as he raised his blood-colored giant claws and fiercely slammed the ground. Asterisk boom. Asterisk with a deafening clap, waves of sand tens of meters tall splashed into the air. What was even more terrifying was that all the mutant scorpions within 100 meters were also thrown into the air. If one observed carefully, they would notice that the black sheen of these black scorpion scales had dimmed a bit, and some of them had even been killed by the shock. This was a swarm of mutant scorpions, a kind of social mutant beast of the desert. They possessed extremely hard shells, 8 eyes and 2 large and powerful black pincers. They also had a segmented, slender tail that curved upward, attached to their rears. At this moment, if one paid close attention, they would definitely notice a faint shimmer at the end of their tails. Innate talent, poison stinger, a racial innate talent possessed by mutant scorpions. Most mutant scorpions can awaken this talent, allowing the stinger at the end of their tails to bypass half of the defenses, easily piercing targets. Additionally, their toxin is deadly. There is no denying that caution should be exercised when dealing with this kind of mutant beast. Everything aside, just their racial innate talent, the poison stinger, made them extremely terrifying. Fortunately, most of these mutant black scorpions were at tier 0. Otherwise, just relying on their innate talent, poison stinger, they could even tear through the defense of pandas. The pandas were renowned for their superior defenses among their peers. The fact that the poison stinger of these mutant black scorpions could penetrate through their defenses and inject terrifying toxins spoke volumes about their level of threat. But while these mutant scorpions were formidable, their defense was not that great. So much so that Stormscale's fierce swat killed dozens of mutant scorpions, and the shockwave sent hundreds of scorpions flying. At this moment, the Knights and Lupin's group, after entering the tide of scorpions, were really like tigers amidst a flock of sheep, displaying their fearsome power. Boom! Along thrust the blood-colored lance in his hands. Boom! Immediately after, much to Yu's astonishment, a blood-colored tornado, dozens of meters wide, emerged from the tip of Along's lance with a thunderous roar, carving a path through the battlefield. This is the combat technique humans are so proud of. Yu slightly raised his brow, taken aback a bit. The kind of combat technique that perfectly combined skill and spiritual energy was really quite formidable. In terms of destructive power, it far exceeded the mutant beast's general perception of humans' techniques. However, at this moment, Along's eyes suddenly narrowed as if he had sensed something. After a moment, he tightly gripped the blood-colored lance and fiercely threw it in a certain direction. Swoosh! Cutting through the air, the blood-colored lance turned into a streak of blood. Just a glance was enough to tell how powerful this throw was. However, what astonished everyone was what happened the next moment. With a metallic clang like the collision of swords, a firework of sparks splattered in the air. At this moment, a knight holding a lance suddenly broke into a cold sweat. Because not far from him, a long and slender black tail with a sharp and menacing stinger, shooting from the ground, had suddenly stopped in midair. If it were not for Along promptly blocking it with his blood-colored lance, this tail, which was almost invisible to the naked eye due to its speed, would have pierced his heart in an instant. There was no doubt about that. After all, this was the terrifying aspect of the mutant black scorpion. Mutant beasts like these that focused on one-hit kill, employed methods that were far beyond what others could imagine. Skitter, skitter, the sharp and piercing shrieks were filled with fury and unwillingness. At the same time, in the rear of the scorpion tide, the sand suddenly started shaking before a colossal creature, at least 5 to 6 meters long, emerged from the ground. It was a mutant black scorpion but several times larger in size. But unlike ordinary mutant black scorpions, its eyes happened to be flickering with green radiance, and even its scales were adorned with a dark and deep green sheen. Its jet-black mouth organs glimmered with a faint yet cold gleam. Further down, its 6 long and powerful legs, even against the yellow sand backdrop, radiated a glossy black sheen. However, the most striking of all was its long raised tail behind. It could freely stretch and retract. Sometimes it was 3 meters long and sometimes dozens of meters. However, amidst its slow swaying, it left a trail of blurry afterimages. If one looked closely, they would notice a barb-like beautiful black gem at the end of its tail, shimmering with the most dark and ghastly radiance. A tier 2 transcendent. With a tinge of seriousness, Along's eyes glimmered at the sight of the giant black scorpion crawling out of a nearby sand dune. But that was not all. Immediately after the emergence of this giant black scorpion, the sand dunes around it shook one after another. Boom, boom, boom. Blasting away the sand, 7 or 8 huge black scorpions, each 2 to 3 meters long, crawled out one after another, emitting piercing shrieks. Did we stumble upon a den of scorpion? With a shadow of a smile, Nine Tails, who had been watching from behind, failed to stop her laughter. Quite a few powerful creatures had emerged this time. I guess so. Nodding, Yu's eyes flickered with anticipation. Although he could take these scorpions down as easily as a wave of his branch, that would not be much of an adventure. It had been 2 days since they had stepped inside the Taklamakan desert, but apart from giving the final blow, Wuxia had never truly engaged in combat. So, of course he would not be breaking this pattern now. More importantly, while the current Scorpion Tide was terrifying and even Scorpion Kings had made an entrance, the Knights still hold the advantage in terms of elite combat power. The only thing they had to be cautious about was avoiding getting completely surrounded by the endless Scorpion Tide. At a glance, Wuxia's group looked like a small boat in the stormy sea, constantly facing danger of capsizing. Master, should we take action? Let's see how it goes first. With a smile, Wuxia also stopped his advance and slowly rooted himself on a sand dune. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 390, Turquoise Scorpling. On a sand dune stood a 10 meters or so tall willow tree, adorned with a gentle glow, swaying gently. At the same time, a red fox, as if bathing in flames, halted its stride and chose to wait. At a glance, the duo of willow tree and red fox seemed incongruent. However, against the backdrop of the dyed red desert behind them, they created an indescribable contrast. Screech, screech, shrill and piercing screeches reverberated across the desert as sound waves, visible to the naked eye, rippled in the air. The Tier 2 mutant black scorpion, looking at humans surrounded by its colony, was furious. Not only was its rare moment of rest disturbed, but humans had also trespassed its territory. In these circumstances, it would be stranger if it was not vexed. However, before it could do anything, swoosh, the sound of something rapidly flying through the air echoed as a silvery white streak of light zoomed straight towards it. Screech, screech, the Tier 2 mutant black scorpion gave out another shrill screech, but it did not retreat. Its long, swaying black tail suddenly blurred, instantly collided with the silvery white streak of light. Asterisk boom boom boom. For a moment, rapid collisions like fast drum beats echoed across the entire battlefield. However, surprisingly, the black-haired girl holding the silvery white lance managed to block all the attacks from the mutant black scorpion. The mutant black scorpion's tail was swift and terrifying, and very few could withstand it. Even Stormscale, another Tier 2 transcendent, had to be cautious. However, now this tall and slender beauty, with just a lance in hand, easily deflected all the attacks of the mutant black scorpion. More importantly, her figure kept getting closer. It was too shocking. Just at this moment. Azien heaved a long deep breath as the depths of her eyes flickered with a deep and profound green glow. Mirror of Soul. It was a unique ability her mount, Rolipoli, had inadvertently awakened. It allowed its user to detect subtle movements and detect the trajectory of spiritual energy. It was precisely this ability that allowed Ziyen to easily block all the attacks of the mutant black scorpion. However, at this moment, Ziyen could not help but tighten her grip on the lance. The impact of the mutant black scorpion's tail was too powerful, to the point that the webs of her hands started to hurt. If she had not enveloped her hands in spiritual energy, just the shock would be enough to tear through her flesh. This was proof of how powerful the attack of the mutant black scorpion's tail was. Be that as it may, this was not a solution. Suddenly, Ziyen squinted her eyes slightly, sensing the imminent attack of the mutant black scorpion. In her gaze, numerous black scorpion tails descended from the sky like a squall, covering her entire delicate body. However, what was most frightening was that none of these was an illusion. Rather, the mutant black scorpion's tail happened to be attacking at such a speed that the afterimages left by it appeared tangible. Rolipoli, hearing his name, Rolipoli instantly understood her intention. In an instant, the panda, with fur as white as jade and a touch of contrasting black, let out a fierce growl, shaking the very air. Growling, subsequently, a storm visible to the naked eye gathered at its claws. Howl. The storm grew stronger and stronger to the point that it almost materialized as the howls of winds filled the surroundings. The storm was clearly the size of a palm, yet it appeared quite horrifying. Unique ability, Claws of the Wind, a terrifying ability possessed by Rolipoli since birth. It allows it to gather a large amount of wind element on its claws, creating a genuine storm with each strike. Asterisk boom. Asterisk accompanied by a thunderous roar that shook the sky, Rolipoli's claw fiercely struck towards the sky with a backhand swipe. Soon after, the palm-sized storm unexpectedly expanded at a visible speed, instantly growing into a tornado with a radius of dozens of meters, heading straight towards the numerous black shadows in the sky. Even more terrifying was the swirling sand that was pulled into the storm. It made the already formidable storm a bit more terrifying. Asterisk bang bang bang. The storm with sand mixed and collided with the numerous dark shadows descending from the sky, bursting with numerous flashes of light. At this moment, Ziyin and Relipoli became the focal point of the entire battlefield. And right at that very moment, kill! With a soft shout, Ziyin, holding the lance, directed Relipoli to charge out of the storm. Her combat sense is impressive. Yu Ziyu nodded his acknowledgement, praising softly. No wonder Ling Er praised her. Her talent is truly commendable. Especially her sense of timing, it's just perfect. However, Yu Ziyu did not have time to focus on these things. Because, while the knights were entangled with the mutant scorpion tide, Yu Ziyu's roots had spread out like a spider web under the sand, covering all directions. At this point, his roots had spread over the entire battlefield. With just a command, his roots could instantly emerge from the ground and strangle every scorpion, instantly devouring the enormous scorpion tide. However, at this moment, as if discovering something, Yu Ziyu's corner of lips suddenly rose. Switching his perspective to a root, Yu Ziyu spotted a small turquoise scorpion huddled in the corner of what appeared to be the den of scorpions, at the rear of the mutant scorpion tide. Around it, there were several mutant black scorpions exuding the aura of Tier 1 Transcendent, silently waiting. Is this the child of the Scorpion King? Smiling, Yu Ziyu promptly sprung into action. Boom boom boom. One after another, roots emerged from the sand, attacking the scorpion not far away. Screech, screech. Screech, screech. Screech, screech. Sensing the imminent attack, the mutant black scorpions guarding the scorpion let out shrill screeches one after another, anxious and uneasy. The next moment, much to the horror, countless strange things resembling black pythons crawling towards them. They could not react, or one could even say Yu Ziyu did not give them a chance to react. Asterisk swoosh, Yu Ziyu's roots suddenly accelerated, disappearing in a flash. The next moment, schlick, with a crisp piercing sound, blackish green blood flowed along the roots. At the same time, a cold and electronic prompt rang in Yu Ziyu's ears. Ding, you have killed a Tier 1 Transcendent Mutant Black Scorpion, evolution points plus 30,000. Feeling satisfied, the corner of his mouth slightly raised. This expedition has turned out to be quite fruitful. However, at this moment Yu Ziyu did not have the time to relish. After taking a deep look at the trembling turquoise scorpion curled up in the corner, Yu Ziyu's roots swiftly entwined around it and dragged the turquoise scorpion towards his location. Just as Yu Ziyu took away this turquoise scorpion, the giant Scorpion King, locked in a battle with Ziyin and Relipoli, seemed to have noticed this and suddenly emitted the most piercing screech. Screech, screech. Its screeches were filled with fury, unwillingness, and even a hidden sense of anxiety. Hearing its screeches, the entire mutant scorpion colony also became agitated and intensified their attacks. In a flash, the Tier 1 knights, including Lupin and others, were in great danger. Watch your step, Yu Ziyu murmured, but his voice seemed to echo in the minds of the knights, Lupin, and the others. In a moment, before the mutant black scorpions could react. Boom, 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 accompanied by a terrifying tremor, the entire battlefield shook. The next moment, the sand suddenly sank. What was even more horrifying was that black python-like roots rose from the ground, one after another. In an instant, they enveloped the entire battlefield. The entire sight gave the impression of gaping maws rising from the depths of the sand, as if swallowing the entire battlefield. Even if a few mutant black scorpions managed to escape, their eyes flickered with fear at the sight of this horrifying and majestic sight, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble. Even though Yu Ziyu had not revealed his aura, this display of his unfathomable power still scared the hell out of the countless mutant black scorpions. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 391, the turquoise scorpion. The upheaval in the world. Not long after, on the desolate battlefield, apart from severed limbs and mutilated corpses, and the pervasive blood-red sky, there was only a 10 meters or so tall willow tree with its branches gently swaying along with the wind. As for the knights, pandas, and the others, they were taking a temporary rest beside Yu Ziyu. This was their first encounter with a medium-sized beast tied in the Taklamakan desert. Thanks to their top-notch combat power, while they were not afraid, the terrifying scale of the scorpion tide still sent shivers down their spine. Except for Ziyin and Along, the two Tier 2 superhumans. Everyone else, including the other knights Lupin and Snow Leopard, were more or less injured. Of course, Golden Ant had not participated in the battle. He was already a Tier 2 Transcendent, and his strength was truly terrifying. If he had taken action, he would have easily swept through a large part of the battlefield. However, that would have made the entire battle meaningless. Anyway, it was all good. They had only suffered injuries, that was all. Even Wuxia had only chosen to intervene because he noticed that the mutant black scorpions had started to fight desperately, throwing all caution to the wind. Of course, at this moment, Wuxia would never admit that he was beside himself with joy at the sight of so many prey and that the desire to kill them for evolution points took over him. At this moment, looking at the 800,000 evolution points he had accumulated, Wuxia nodded in satisfaction. A medium-sized swarm has provided me with so many evolution points. If I encounter similar swarms a few more times, my evolution points will replenish significantly. At this point, it should be noted that the Tier 2 Black Scorpion alone gave him 200,000 evolution points, accounting for almost half of the evolution points he had gained in this battle. Be that as it may, no amount of evolution points could satisfy Wuxia's current needs. For him, comprehending the 5-color spirit flower's innate talent, instant was proving to be a bottomless hole. Up until now, Wuxia had already consumed over 1 million evolution points, but he had only managed to decipher just 1% of the 5-color spirit flower's innate talent, instant. The terrifying consumption made Wuxia feel a bit uneasy. However, after thinking about the horror of the 5-color spirit flower's innate talent, instant, which could freeze time, Wuxia resolutely suppressed his reluctance. This was a truly heaven-defying talent, and worth every evolution point he would have to spend to acquire it. Moreover, Wuxia has a feeling that if he could acquire this innate talent, his foundation would become significantly stronger, which may be significantly beneficial to his future breakthroughs. Of course, this breakthrough was definitely not a breakthrough to the Tier 4. It was related to breakthroughs beyond the Tier 4, which would be significantly harder and even more terrifying. Now, the reason why Wuxia was suppressing his spiritual energy, choosing to travel, was to further strengthen his foundation. Only with a deep foundation could future breakthroughs be easier. Wuxia considered it from a long-term viewpoint. Taking advantage of the current situation where he was almost invincible in the world, Wuxia could freely plunder the resources and everything he wanted. If possible, Wuxia even wanted to get his hands on rare spirit stone mines such as wind attribute, lightning attribute, darkness attribute, and the likes. He could acquire minor divine abilities using these spirit stone mines and lay an even deeper foundation. Just at this moment, as if thinking of something, Wuxia's eyes suddenly narrowed, looking at a small green figure curled up in a corner not far away. It was a scorpion. It was about the size of a palm and appeared very soft and tender. However, its front half was covered with hexagonal protrusions, shimmering with a green brilliance resembling diamonds. These protrusions were not only on its front half but also densely spread on its 6 long and powerful legs. At a glance, this turquoise scorpion unexpectedly appeared elegant and exquisite. Its eyes were golden, and there was a hint of nobility in their depths. However, a bit of fear could also be seen in the depths of its eyes. Although it had just been born, it had a sense of danger that was far beyond ordinary mutant beasts. It was afraid and apprehensive. Its innate instinct had already occupied its mind. Even its long, slender tail that had only 5 segments was raised, as if in fear. However, what was even more striking was each segment of its tail, which was vibrant turquoise in color. Under light, it would flicker from time to time, reflecting a unique luster like a prism. Wuxia focused his gaze, taking a deep look at this turquoise scorpion. Moments later, a series of information flooded into his mind. Race: Mutant Black Scorpion. Rank: Tier 0 Level 6. Innate talent: Diamond Stinger. Its stinger is far superior to those of the same species, and can easily tear through the enemy's defenses. Furthermore, its toxin can freeze its enemies. Additionally, this turquoise scorpion can continuously extract the life force of the enemy with its stinger to supplement its own needs. Unique abilities: Rapid Recovery. The turquoise scorpion, which can extract the life force of the enemy, can also use this life force to heal its own injuries. Tail Thrust. It can freely control the length of its tail and execute a stab so fast that it breaks the sound barrier. Diamond Exoskeleton. Its diamond-like exoskeleton provides a significant boost to its defenses. If needed, it can be shrunk and even shattered to unleash a terrifying attack. It's got quite the talent. Yu faintly chuckled, looking at the turquoise scorpion with a hint of appreciation in his eyes. It was really amazing. With such talents, it would be a pity if this scorpion was not nurtured. Thinking of this, Yu also looked at the 5-color spirit flower and stated, "Take good care of this little fella." Okay. The 5-color spirit flower let out a light laugh as her petals trembled slightly. Then an invisible force surged towards the turquoise scorpion. The next moment, the turquoise scorpion gradually stopped trembling, as if it was no longer afraid. Pacification. It was a kind of application of spiritual energy to calm someone's mind. Now, the 5-color spirit flower's pacification happened to be just perfect to appease the terrified scorpion. Furthermore, the turquoise scorpion even lifted its head, staring blankly at one of Yu's branches, where a colorful spirit flower was rooted, with a touch of affection. While Yu had ventured into the Taklamakan desert to find the medium-sized fire tribute spirit stone mine, a battle was taking place on another continent that shook the entire world. Ruhar. A furious dragon's roar echoed through the world. In the pitch-black night, the dark clouds seemed as if they were about to crush the city, dense and ominous. Crackle, crackle. Intermittent flashes of lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating a colossal dragon wing hidden in the pitch-black ominous clouds. Humans, you're seeking death. Furiously roaring in anger, the terrifying presence hidden deep within the dark ominous clouds slowly raised its head. At the same time, an astonishingly fearsome energy started gathering in its mouth. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 392, The King of Knights of the Great Britain. Just as the pitch-black giant dragon, or rather, the wyvern, was gathering an astonishing amount of energy in its mouth, on the ground, a huge crowd had gathered. Just by a rough estimation, there were thousands of humans. Each and every one of them exuded an extraordinary aura, and mostly wore a different attire. Moreover, there were flags symbolizing their nations flying high. They were not from Australia. This huge crowd had gathered from various parts of the world. Originally, a lot more had set out for Australia. Unfortunately, the seas proved too fatal for many to continue. Even though humans have developed ships that can shield sea creatures' senses, crossing the ocean was still difficult and perilous. Presumably, at least 30 to 40% of those who had set out for Australia had perished in the vast ocean. This was testament of how perilous the seas were. Among the people who had managed to arrive, even the weakest of them was a Tier 1 superhuman. At this moment, everyone stared fixedly at the terrifying entity in the sky, resembling a creature from myths and legends. Breath attack. Suddenly, a figure standing on a giant eagle had its eyes narrowed as a solemn expression took over its face. Ling Er was not unfamiliar with a dragon's breath attack. Before coming here, the Chinese government had given her a briefing on the wyvern and shown her images. She had been briefed on how the black dragon's breath attack pierced through hundreds of kilometers of a mountain range, even leveling an area no less than the size of an ordinary city. And it was only a Tier 3 transcendent. At this stage, it already possessed strength terrifying enough to threaten major nations. As a wyvern, a creature evolving towards the legendary race, dragon, even if it had just advanced to the Tier 3, its strength was far beyond what others could imagine. And now, this formidable entity was once again gathering that kind of earth-shattering energy deep within the dark clouds. Ling Er heaved a long, deep breath and glanced at the hundreds of Chinese who followed her, a look of contemplation flashing in her eyes. She was wondering whether she should confront it or evade it. After just a moment, Ling Er's eyebrows suddenly rose, as if she had sensed something. The next moment she saw two figures that were standing at the forefront of the Chinese, simultaneously taking a step forward. One of them was riding a panda. He was donning a pitch-black armor and happened to be wearing a cold expression on his face. At a glance, he appeared mysterious yet terrifying. He was the strongest of the Chinese Iron Knights, a rare Apex Tier 2 superhuman. The other person was a middle-aged man wearing a green robe. He was carrying a long sword on his back. He gave off a refreshing and elegant aura. This was someone Ling Er was unfamiliar with. However, sensing his aura, she could tell that he too was an Apex superhuman. However, she had no idea where he came from. He had appeared out of nowhere. Sure enough, China still has secrets I don't know. Murmuring in her mind, Ling Er signaled the giant eagle under her to fly towards the front. At this moment, with so many superhumans present, if she were to retreat, the hard-earned reputation she had built would go down the drain in an instant. While the black wyvern's breath attack was terrifying, at the end of the day, it was a large-scale attack. Its single-target damage was not as terrifying as imagined. In other words, the strength of these Apex Tier 2 superhumans, whose capabilities were beyond ordinary people's imagination, could easily withstand it. Of course, the possibility of buckling under it could not be eliminated either. However, definitely not Ling Er, because her strength was even more formidable than others could possibly imagine. Just at this moment, something unexpected happened. Thump, thump, thump. Loud footsteps suddenly resounded loud and clear on the noisy battlefield, shaking everyone's heart. Following the sound, a girl with European features, blonde hair, blue eyes, wielding a large knightly sword and clad in bright silver armor, stepped out from the crowd. However, she also had the characteristics of an Asian woman, a petite figure, delicate features, and an underdeveloped body. She was extremely cute, possessing facial features that blended the aesthetics of both Eastern and Western. Many people were completely mesmerized by her beauty the moment they laid eyes on her. At this moment, time seemed to have come to a standstill, and the air seemed to have frozen. However, the blonde girl, who was from the country that used to be known as the Empire on which the sun never sets, did not stop her steps, and had arrived in front of the crowd. King of Knights, Cornelia Shelley. Whispers broke out in the crowd as countless gazes focused on her. In this great era of spiritual energy resurgence and the advent of transcendence, not every country was as stable as America and China. There were countries such as Japan, completely surrounded by the sea on all sides, facing crises every day and on the verge of collapsing. Among these countries, Great Britain was one of them. At one point in time, Britain lost contact with humanity. But, during that dark period, countless geniuses appeared in Great Britain. One of them was the girl in front of them, known as the King of Knights. Following the example of King Arthur, the legendary king of Great Britain, she drew her sword to claim the throne and even formed a unique Knights of the Round Table to defend the glory of Great Britain. However, while she was known as the King of Knights, it was not as simple as imitating King Arthur. Because the sword in her hand was identical to the one King Arthur was said to have wielded in ancient legends. She was the one who pulled the sword out from a huge rock. At the moment she pulled out the sword, a terrifying mana erupted from it. Mana was synonymous with what the East referred to as spiritual energy. The moment she pulled out the sword, the flow of time froze for her, and her body and appearance ceased to grow in age. This was why this girl, who was already in her 20s, looked so young. However, after giving it a thought, it was understandable. In the East, there were inheritances, and even mutant beasts awakened memories from the previous era. So, the West having some inheritances was not surprising either. The only thing that surprised Ling Er a bit was that Great Britain's King of Knights, Cornelia Shelley, whom even China feared, was so young, or one might even say juvenile. "All of you step back," Cornelia Shelley commanded in a cold voice, giving chills to everyone who heard it. At the same time, the blonde girl, who was already at the forefront, drew the long sword in her hand, and pointed straight towards the night sky, towards the black wyvern hidden in the depths of the clouds. Surprisingly, as the blonde girl pointed her sword, an incomprehensible vast blue screen of light slowly unfolded in the sky, shielding the humans behind it. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 393, The Terrifying Incident in Australia. Unique ability, Avalon, an inherent power of the sword, said to have been passed down from mythical legends. Anyone inside Avalon is immune to all physical impacts. Even attacks beyond its level cannot reach those protected by Avalon. This was the innate ability of the sword, a defensive skill that the blonde girl had mastered after wielding the sword for a long time. At this moment, a blue light curtain unfolded, shielding countless humans. At this precise moment, boom! Accompanied by a fearsome roar, a flickering pillar of light, with lightning striking around it, descended from the depths of the night sky, *kaboom, star. With another deafening clap, in the astonished gazes of the superhumans, the pillar of light fiercely crashed into the blue light screen. However, the very next moment, in the amazed and stunned gazes of many, the blue light screen only trembled slightly as ripples spread over it like ripples in a lake. Then, the fearsome pillar of light, like the water flowing in a river, flowed along the blue light screen, scattering in all directions. Ho! In the aftermath, amidst the howling winds, the breath of wyverns snapped countless trees in half, leveling mountains after mountains. Be that as it may, the humans under this blue light screen remained calm, as the wyvern's breath did not even manage to rustle even a single strand of hair. At this moment, if one observed closely, they would notice that the blonde beauty standing at the forefront suddenly trembled a little. Apparently, casting such a massive blue light screen was taxing for her. However, she could not flinch at this moment. With a cold gaze, the blonde girl, holding the long sword, shouted in an icy cold tone, "Charge!" At the drop of her command, 5 figures, each donning a white cape, suddenly charged out. The 12 Knights of the Round Table, their status was equivalent to the secret task forces of China. They were a symbol of the highest combat power of Britain. Even China was wary of their formidable prowess, because all 12 of them were Tier 2 superhumans. At present, only 5 had arrived here, the remaining 7 were guarding Britain. It should be noted that the internal affairs of Great Britain, which was on the brink of collapse, was not as complicated as that of China and America. Their entire nation was supported by 2 major forces. One was the 12 Knights of the Round Table led by Cornelia Shelley, the King of Knights. The other was a group of wizards who called themselves the Court Wizards, and mainly specialized in long-range attacks. What a strong-willed little girl. Pursing her lips, Ling Er could not help but chuckle. In order to help everyone withstand this breath attack, the blonde girl had resorted to using her trump card, a clear testament to her strong will. However, they were not comrades. Although they were all humans, each had their own axe to grind. Even Ling Er was carrying with a mission. She must seize the corpse of the wyvern at any cost. In other words, they were competitors to some extent. So, this is the chivalry she adheres to. Muttering to himself, the strongest knight of China became lost in thought, glancing at the blonde girl. However, after a moment he shook his head. Unlike Great Britain's Knights of the Round Table, the Knights of China was more like a profession. Great Britain's Knights of the Round Table was a symbol of status. There was no comparison between the two. However, it could not be denied that this little blonde beauty truly possessed the renowned chivalry of the West. It was nothing short of sacrificing oneself to protect others. Be that as it may, they were in a contest for supremacy. A sigh escaped from the strongest Iron Knight of China as he gratefully looked at the blonde girl. Nonetheless, he commanded the panda he was riding as it suddenly leaped out. Meanwhile, oblivious to the humans, pairs of cold eyes were silently watching them from a distance. The pairs of cold eyes belonged to a dozen or so mutant beasts. However, the striking thing about these mutant beasts was that all of them were humanoid in appearance. Some bore resemblance to kangaroos, but their limbs happened to be terrifyingly developed. They were extremely tall and straight. Their arms were crossed in front of their chests, and a thick, whip-like tail was swaying gently left and right behind them. Although their tails were only swaying gently, its movement was creating loud swooshing-like sounds. Others resembled black cats but happened to be standing upright. They had an air of elegance and nobility as well as freedom. Their slender bodies showcased a sense of strength. There was also a pure white rabbit lying quietly in a corner. Every now and then, it would reveal its teeth, gleaming white like polished jade. Didn't expect the humans to really come? Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. It's normal, humans are greedy by nature. Responding indifferently, the kangaroo with well-developed limbs added in a cold voice, if Ned had not been the first to break through to Tier 3 and rule the continent, we would not have attracted humans from other continents. But there was nothing we could do. Ned is exceptionally talented. In addition, he just chose to secretly break through when we were preoccupied with our own war. We had no choice but to now helplessly watch. At the words, the lead kangaroo heaved a sigh. Now, all we can do is hope that these guys have some means to cause trouble for Ned. Speaking of this, the lead kangaroo also turned around and looked at a giant green lizard behind him, and added with a sneer, Ned is the second one in your lizard clan to break through to Tier 3. Are you sure you want to do this? Umph. Coldly snorting, the green lizard disdainfully replied, he was already banished from our clan. Now, after advancing, not only did he fail to return, but he even attempted to enslave the entire clan. If something is to blame, it would be his wild ambitions. The kangaroo did not say anything in response, rather the corner of its lips rose slightly as if mocking. Isn't it because you, green bastard, are weaker than him, and yet you are unwilling to relinquish power? Still, it couldn't be any better for us. If this green bastard didn't hold onto the lizard clan's tail, it would indeed be exceptionally difficult to surround and kill Ned. After all, the lizard clan happened to be a powerful clan on this continent. Not only was their individual combat power extremely extraordinary, but they also held a terrifying advantage in numbers. At present, the southwest corner of Australia has been occupied by hundreds of thousands of mutant lizards. Among them, many possessed ancient bloodlines, referred to as atavistic lizards by humans, hiding in plain sight. If they sprang into action, not to mention coming so close to Ned, they would have struggled to set foot on the continent. It should be brought to notice that the black wyverny Ned's lair was located along the coast. When humans touched the shore, they were intentionally guided to the vicinity of Ned's lair by some mutant beasts. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for humans to be completely oblivious to the true danger of Australia until now. Australia was no longer the same as in the past. Unless someone ventured deeper into it, it was genuinely challenging to imagine the horror of this continent today. In the words of some mutant beasts, this entire continent already belonged to the mutant beasts. Even some humans were under their control. Everything was premeditated, all in order to merely check the capabilities of humans of other continents, and incidentally inflict some injuries to Ned. As for the final outcome, they would ultimately be taking the stage and enjoying the real harvest. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 394, The Giant Black Eggs. After a short while, in a corner of Australia, the ground was riddled with holes. The black wyvern's massive dragon wings happened to be hanging down the mountain, his blood flowing like magma, dyeing half the mountain red. However, that was not what was terrifying. What was truly terrifying was that the sky above the black wyvern appeared dark red as the blood rained down. Bathing in the blood rain, countless battered and exhausted humans looked at the proud figure not far away in disbelief. From beginning to end, the wyvern had not lowered his head, not even once. "You stupid lowlives, you don't even realize you're being used." He was still as arrogant as ever. Nonetheless, no one questioned it. Over a dozen Apex Tier 2 superhumans had besieged him, along with nearly 100 ordinary Tier 2 superhumans. Even with the participation of so many superhumans and the use of 2 tactical nuclear missiles fired by Americans, and spirit energy cannon used by the Chinese, they still failed to defeat this wyvern. Rather, it only infuriated the wyvern further, which ultimately resulted in heavy losses for the humans as a whole. From the very beginning when she was grinding her own agenda, to now, Ling Er had no choice but to actively cooperate with the humans. Just this was enough to prove the dreadful combat power of this mutant wyvern. Everyone knew a Tier 3 Transcendent was terrifying, but for it to be as terrifying as this wyvern was beyond everyone's imagination. More importantly, the black wyvern had only recently broken through, his spiritual energy happened to be just over 1 million. He might have undergone a qualitative transformation, but it was ultimately not as terrifying as Yuziyu. If it were Yuziyu, he would have obliterated everyone with just a single whip of his branch. Ling Er would not have been shocked by that result, but this black wyvern, unexpectedly. But what was even more helpless was that some powerful superhumans had noticed numerous terrifying entities gradually approaching from the heart of Australia. Did we just get exploited? With an uncertain expression, the Chinese middle-aged man with an ethereal demeanor looked towards the heart of Australia. "I guess so." Nodding, the strongest Iron Knight of China, whose right arm had been torn apart by the black wyvern's claw, was also speechless. During the battle, they had already discovered the existence of powerful entities, spying from afar. However, as they were already locked in a heated battle with the wyvern, it was already impossible to retreat. Now they were in a dilemma. Taking a deep breath, Ling Er took the initiative to suggest, "Let's retreat." Retreat? The Chinese superhumans were slightly taken aback, nonetheless they did not object. Now it was indeed not the time to be stubborn. Especially with one terrifying aura after another in the distance, everyone's expression could not help but turn grim. But just at this moment, a sudden voice echoed through the sky, "Traitors shall all perish." At these words, the heavily injured black wyvern suddenly trembled. At the same time, under the disbelieving gaze of countless humans, the black wyvern, with his wings hanging down the mountain and bleeding constantly, suddenly had his aura soaring continuously. What was even more incredible was that the blood flowing down the mountain like magma began to flow back continuously as if time were reversing. This? How is this possible? Cries of shock and exclamations filled the air. Not only humans but also many mutant beasts in the distance, rushing over, could not hide the shock on their faces. As expected, he indeed kept an ace up his sleeve. The speaker seemed to be commending but also expressing their helplessness. Among the numerous mutant beasts, the massive lizard at the forefront pounced suddenly, roar! Amidst a roar that shook the sky, in the horrified gazes of countless humans, a gigantic green lizard, hundreds of meters long and resembling a mountain, came down from the sky and fiercely clashed with the black wyvern. At the same time, a noble and elegant black cat, walking upright, holding a black energy ball that resembled a starry sky, appeared beside the black wyvern's head in a flash. "Spirit cat, have you betrayed me too?" The black wyvern's voice carried a hint of madness, seemingly infuriated to the extreme. "You shouldn't have killed my parents." The black cat's cold voice resonated, fiercely slamming the energy ball into the head of the black wyvern. Asterisk boom. Asterisk with a deafening explosion, the black wyvern's head swayed uncontrollably as his aura, which was recovering, came to a halt. Apparently, the mysterious black cat's energy ball could suppress his regenerative abilities. However, it was precisely this dark energy ball that had completely enraged the black wyvern. Roar! The black wyvern gave out a terrifying roar, causing the entire world to change color. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning streaked across the sky as dark lightning arcs streaked around the black wyvern. Then, he spread his dragon wings and directly pounced on the approaching horde of beasts, ignoring the humans. Betrayal is the most unforgivable for someone as proud as him. Seemingly understanding the black wyvern's emotions, Ling Er chose to continue to stand down. Indeed. Heaving a sigh, China's strongest knight also chose to stand down. Had it not for their difference in race, he really wanted to be friends with this black wyvern. He was really pleased with the black wyvern's arrogance, as well as his clear distinction between likes and dislikes. Unfortunately, their difference in species set them on a hostile path. However, just at this moment, as if sensing something, the strongest knight squinted his eyes and looked towards the distance. In his gaze, a group of short and lean humans were sneaking out of the black wyvern's lair. It can't be true, can it? Seemingly witnessing something unbelievable, the usually cold strongest knight's expression underwent a drastic change. "What is it?" Asking, Ling Er also looked along the strongest knight's gaze right away. The next moment, much to Ling Er's astonishment, more than 30 humans, seemingly Japanese, slipped out of the wyvern's lair, carrying 4 giant black eggs with intricate patterns, the size of an average human. Seemed to have ransacked the black wyvern's lair? The facial muscles of China's strongest knight twitched, dumbfounded at this discovery. He could not believe that while they were fighting for their lives here, some people were actually reaping the rewards. However, at this moment, it was evident that not just Chinese superhumans had discovered them. Even other countries had noticed. And now, seemingly aware of the strange gazes, the leader of the Japanese superhumans hurriedly explained with a pleasing smile on his face, "Everyone deserves a share. There's everyone's share in it. But for now we should hurry up and slip away." Saying this, a look of horror took over the face of the middle-aged man with a small goatee as he glanced at the distant, terrifying battle. During their clashes, just any casual attack caused the ground to split, and stronger strikes leveled mountains to the ground. Such clashes were indeed too horrifying. At this moment, after shooting a deep look at the Japanese superhuman in the distance, China's strongest knight remained silent for a moment before nodding in agreement. "All right, let's retreat." He further added, "Prioritize protecting the Japanese." Just as he stated this, the countless Chinese superhumans, as if realizing something, rushed towards the Japanese. However, compared to then, a blond young man with a robust figure happened to be faster. He had started leading a large group of people towards the Japanese at a moment's notice. He was the leader of the American team. He was comparatively not that famous, but he was no less weaker than China's strongest knight. He had performed outstandingly over the course of the battle. Evolution begins with a big tree. Chapter 395, Medium-Sized Fire Tribute Spirit Stone Mine. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to humans, high up at the horizon, the black wyvern, surrounded by black lightning, turned his head when the Japanese superhumans emerged from his lair, casting a deep glance. His gaze was filled with reluctance yet gratification. The complex emotions in his eyes could not just be described with words alone. "Go on, the farther the better. After I've quelled this pathetic rebellion, I will definitely come to pick you up with a large army." Muttering to himself, the black wyvern suppressed the reluctance in his heart, and erupted with an even more terrifying momentum, pouncing towards the approaching mutant beasts. Several days later, even before the team of Chinese superhumans returned from Australia, China received a piece of news. Japan managed to steal the black wyvern eggs. Not only that, these 4 eggs had already been distributed. Great Britain's King of Knights, Cornelia Shelley, received one, and one went to one of the most powerful nations, America. As for the remaining 2, one was still in the hands of Japan, and the last one belonged to China. It was a fair distribution, 2 eggs for both East and West. After allocating these eggs, America and Great Britain parted ways at sea and made a beeline towards their respective countries overnight. Meanwhile, China, protecting Japan, set out towards the Asian continent. However, everyone knew that this was not the end of it. Naturally, it was really not the end of it. Apart from the 4 countries that got their hands on the wyvern's eggs, dozens of other countries were left gawking. The tall and stalwart men of strict and barbaric Russia were looking at the Japanese with a tinge of hatred in his eyes. The priests of the Alliance of Southeast Asian Nations, who had also taken part in the battle, cast an extremely complicated gaze at the Japanese seated on the Chinese battleship. In other words, the real undercurrents were just starting to surge. In Misty Mountains. Bull Demon, who was tasked to guard the entire Misty Mountains, looked at the distant Sarcosuchus. After pondering for a long time, he finally asked, "What do you think about that news from China?" "According to eldest sister, it's the egg of a Tier 3 wyvern. I think a huge fight will break out when they arrive at the shore. On the sea, those humans would not dare to act recklessly if they wanted to live." Smiling, the perceptive Sarcosuchus managed to guess everything. "Umph." Bull Demon, with the head of a bull and body of a human, let out a cold snort first, then shook his head and stated in an arrogant voice, "Although I don't know how they managed to steal it, the black wyvern's eggs are not something these humans are qualified to possess." Indeed, Sarcosuchus also agreed with this. Mutant beasts and humans could never coexist peacefully. At present, China was vastly superior to Misty Mountains. China's Iron Knights, the combination of humans and pandas, had already given Misty Mountains a headache. If a Dragon Knight also became a part of their force, Misty Mountains would gain another powerful adversary. This was not something Misty Mountains wanted to see. Furthermore, the combat power of that black wyvern was extremely formidable. He was no less inferior to Ninetails and Brewmaster. Such was their bloodline. Now, with an example, their strength after advancing to Tier 3 could be imagined. Exhaling deep breaths, Sarcosuchus and Bull Demon exchanged glances, pondering over this. After a moment, Bull Demon looked up at the sky and commanded in a deep voice, "Feli, contact Master as soon as possible." "Yes." With a light chirp, the peregrine falcon, Feli, spread his wings and soared high. Unlike satellite communication employed by humans, Misty Mountains could only rely on the most primitive method, passing messages through birds. Fortunately, Feli was extremely swift. If he flew high in the sky, given his fearsome speed, very few people could intercept him. Meanwhile, on a mountain in the Taklamakan Desert. To be more precise, on a hill of sand. This hill happened to be enormous, so huge that one could not see the end of it at a glance. Here Wuxia and his group decided to stop. At this moment, if one looked up, they would see 8 figures appearing side by side at the top of the hill, calmly gazing in the distance despite the wind and sand blowing on their faces. Standing behind them was Wuxia, tall and lush green as ever. "This is the location of the medium-sized fire attribute spirit stone mine." Saying this, Wuxia's roots penetrated deep into the sand, spreading in all directions. "A medium-sized fire attribute spirit stone mine?" Muttering, Ah Long, who looked even fiercer than before thanks to the new scars on his face, had his eyes shine brightly. Spirit stone mines were precious. A medium-sized fire attribute spirit stone mine could even make China's heart race. No wonder Master made a trip this far. Meanwhile, while his roots were penetrating deeper into the desert, the corners of Wuxia's suddenly curled upwards. He could feel a heat, different from usual, coming from underneath this hill of sand. However, along with the heat he could also sense hostility and bloodthirst. 4 Tier 2 mutant beasts? Wuxia softly whispered to himself, his eyes flickering incessantly. Over the course of this trip, he had already run into quite a few Tier 2 mutant beasts. In addition to the Black Scorpion King at the beginning, he also ran into a mutant camel with 2 humpbacks, which appeared as if it was carrying 2 mountains. It possessed terrifying endurance and physical strength. Even going all out, Long Ziyan and others took half an hour to tire it out. Additionally, he also encountered an apex predator of the sky, the mutant goshawk. Unfortunately, the goshawk proved to be quite cunning. When it sensed Uziyu's presence, it ran away at the first opportunity, causing Uziyu to doubt whether he had converged his aura properly or not. Later, Uziyu checked its status screen and discovered that the Tier 2 mutant goshawk possessed a unique innate talent related to sensing danger. Apparently, it had sensed an inexplicable danger from Uziyu the moment it saw him. I have to admit, some mutant beasts, despite being weak, possess peculiar talents. Marveling, Uziyu's gaze turned toward the depths of the hill in the desert. As if crossing space, he saw numerous thick pythons surrounded by flames, leisurely climbing up a rock, or entwining around a completely red tree. These are probably spirit trees nurtured by the fire attribute spirit stone mine. Fire attribute mutant beasts quite like these spirit trees. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 396. Battle starts. Master, should we take action? Inquiring, Long gently stroked his mount, Storm Scale. Not only did the prolonged and continuous battles not make Long and his mount, Storm Scale, feel fatigue, but their fighting spirit was also soaring, with red aura swirling around their bodies. From a distance, they seemed to be enveloped in a crimson haze. The duo looked quite formidable and awe-inspiring. Go ahead. Uziyu waved his branch and gave his consent. If it were before, Uziyu would not let these knights directly clash with the Inferno Snakes. But now, after days of fighting, enjoying the nurturing of Uziyu's life essence, and having their psyche tempered by the 5-color spirit flower, Long and the other knights have undergone significant transformations. Furthermore, even Snow Leopard had stepped into Tier 2, a testament of considerable progress. The current Snow Leopard, utilizing his innate talent, super speed, even impressed Uziyu. He was as fast as a flash of light. Among his peers, only a few entities could catch a glimpse of his figure, and even fewer could contend with him in battle. Of course, the transcendent Snow Leopard could only execute super speed for a limited number of times, comparable to an assassin's momentary burst of speed. A prolonged battle would tire it out. At this moment, hearing Uziyu's voice, Snow Leopard promptly crouched down. Exhaling a deep breath, Snow Leopard's body became taut bit by bit, resembling a taut bow, exuding a palpable sense of strength. And just a moment later, with a deafening boom, Snow Leopard vanished into the air. Only those with keen eyes could barely catch a glimpse of a white streak cruising through the air. That's some fearsome speed. Before the words were even finished, in the distance down the hill, a deafening crash reverberated through the desert as shattered pieces of rocks flew everywhere, immediately accompanied by a piercing cry that resonated through the sky. Upon closer inspection, a gaping wound had appeared on the 7-inch spot, the heart of a 12-meter-long inferno python, which resembled a creature bathing in flames. Blood gushed out of the wound, filling the air with a pungent smell of blood. Hiss, hiss. Hiss, hiss. Snakes' hisses rang to no end as countless inferno pythons were alarmed. In addition, a dozen massive pythons raised their heads towards the sky and roared, giving out the most miserable roar. Let's go too. Saying so, Long patted his mount, Storm Scale, and leaped out. And immediately afterward, boom, boom, boom. The earth quaked. Although only Long and the knights were charging, the cloud of dust they raised filled the sky, giving the impression that a huge army was charging. Right then, a voice suddenly rang in Uziyu's ears. Master, let me join in on the action too. Sitting on one of Uziyu's, Golden Ant cast a deep glance towards the depths of the hill and stated in a solemn voice, I can sense a few mutant inferno pythons that can pose a threat to them. Alright, go ahead. Uziyu nodded his approval, not intending to stop him. He was not worried about Golden Ant. As the most talented member of the Ant clan, his talent of strength was absolutely daunting. Now he was gradually revealing his formidable potential. Crack, crack, Golden Ant clenched his fists as cracking sounds echoed as if the air had exploded. His eyes became focused, and the next moment, he kicked the leaf beneath it. Asterisk boom. Asterisk accompanied by a loud noise, Golden Ant shot towards the depths like a cannonball. At the same time he raised his fist, gathering strength. The next moment, a visible transparent column of light shot towards the front. Air cannon, by striking the air, creates a powerful air cannon that obliterates everything in its path. This was an extremely formidable technique and a testament to Golden Ant's terrifying physical strength. Not long after, in the distant depths of the hills, a transparent light column as thick as a water bucket struck the ground, shaking the area within several hundred meters. What was even more terrifying was the shockwave created by the impact. The shockwave was so powerful that it could knock people off their feet several kilometers away. However, it seemed that this transparent light column had thoroughly angered this den of inferno snakes lurking within the Taklamakan desert. Hiss, hiss. Hiss, hiss. One after another, shrill hisses, seemingly coming straight from prehistoric era, reverberated through the desert. The next moment, the ground split apart as towering red pythons emerged from underneath. With entire bodies covered in flames, tongues of flames flickering from the corners of their eyes, and radiant red scales covering them, they appeared quite scary. At this moment, their bodies were continuously swaying as they lifted their thick form towards the sky. There were 4 of them, and the sight of these 4 huge pythons bathed in flames, propping their bodies straight in the desert, appeared both magnificent and terrifying. Hiss, hiss. Amidst the furious hissing, flames swept through the entire sky, causing the temperatures to rise rapidly, turning the entire area into a furnace. Inferno python, mutating from unknown species of snakes and born in the flames, were genuine mutant serpents with the fire attribute. Kill? As loud as thunder roar reverberated through the sky, as A Long, wielding a lance, rushed towards a colossal Tier 2 python on storm scale. On the other side, Ziyen, along with Snow Leopard, also picked their targets and charged, not wanting to fall behind. As for Golden Ant, he shot directly towards the thickest and the biggest python. His arms rose and fell and transparent columns of light shot out one after another. At the same time, a murmur echoed in the air, "Strength boost, 2ND stage." Just at the drop of these words, Golden Ant started trembling violently, as if he was enduring a great deal of pressure. Even his expression became solemn. However, what it gained in return was an even more terrifying power. Visible to the naked eye, the light columns it emitted were thicker and more tangible than the previous transparent light column. Boom! Accompanied by a loud noise, the transparent light column fiercely struck the body of the Inferno python. The impact was so strong that it even caused the Inferno python's body to sway violently. What was even more terrifying was that the impact even shattered the thick scales of the Inferno python, and glaring red blood flowed from within. This was the might of Golden Ant's punch after activating his strength boost. Just one punch inflicted such excruciating pain that ordinary Tier 2 transcendents could hardly endure. Even now, the Tier 2 Inferno python seemed a bit stunned. However, before it could react, a petite figure landed on it. Boom, boom, boom. The next moment, one punch after another struck the Inferno python's body, leaving fist imprints on it. How violent! Uzu was a little taken aback at the sight of Golden Ant's brutal display of power. Actually, this Tier 2 Inferno python had become a living target for Golden Ant. What was truly terrifying was that the power of Golden Ant was enough to knock the Inferno python. Watching the massive Inferno python in the distance madly rolling and thrashing in agony, Uzu mourned for it in silence. It was really unfortunate to encounter Golden Ant. Golden Ant's small size and fearsome strength made it a natural nemesis of such large-sized mutant beasts. Encountering him was plain unlucky. In contrast, others, whether it was A Long or Ziyen, even when going all out, only had the upper hand. They were not crushing their opponents one-sidedly like Golden Ant. It stood as a testament to how big of an advantage Golden Ant had against those large-sized mutant beasts. In Uzu's eyes, Golden Ant's formidable strength could display its might in any situation, except against some soft-body mutant creatures or those without tangible form. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 397, taking action, harvesting. Battles were always cruel. Mournful cries echoed through the sky, with blood flying all around. However, at this moment, in a distant place, as if sensing something, a figure suddenly narrowed its eyes. The Inferno Snake clan is at war with someone? Muttering in a charming voice, a strange figure raised its eyes and looked towards the distant horizon. It could feel intense and powerful fire element fluctuations coming from that location. So much so that countless mutant beasts were trembling in fear. Furrowing its eyebrows, the figure began twisting its body, rushing towards the depths of the desert, in the direction of the Inferno Snake clan. The Inferno Snake clan had done her a favor. More precisely, she used to be a member of the Inferno Snake clan. It was only due to some chance and opportunities that she had managed to grow to her current state. During that time, the Inferno Snake clan had provided her with fire attribute spirit stones. In exchange, she protected the Inferno Snake clan after she had grown. Even when someone tried to snatch the fire attribute spirit stone mine, she would intervene. The figure's unique form was of particular interest. If Wuxia saw it, even he would be surprised. Meanwhile, the battle was ravaging on. Just at this moment, with a hiss, an Inferno Python drew close to a Tier 1 knight in the blink of an eye. Then, twisting its body, the Inferno Python coiled around the knight, dismaying the knight. As for his mount, the panda, despite its growls and struggle, also had several Inferno Pythons coiled around it, preventing it from moving even an inch. Die. Gnashing his teeth, the knight formed a claw with his hand, and with fearsome spiritual energy surging around his fingers, ruthlessly clawed on the Inferno Python's body. Squish! With a stabbing sound, the knight's hand pierced deep into the Inferno Python's body. But immediately after, it brought a drastic change in the knight's expression. Poison. Crying in a surprised voice, the knight looked at his right hand, now blackened and even tinged with purple. After fighting for so long, this was the first time he came to learn that the blood of the Inferno Snake was poisonous. No, perhaps it's just this particular Inferno Snake. However, he did not have the time to brood over this because the next moment, crack crack. Sounds akin to bone-breaking rang as the knight felt tremendous force acting upon him from all sides. Slowly, the thick Inferno Python had coiled around the knight several times. What was even more frightening was that it kept tightening, as if wanting to strangle the knight little by little. Slowly, it became harder for him to breathe and his body grew numb. Giddily, the knight saw the blurry figures of his companions urgently rushing towards him from afar, one after another. It's too late. In anguish, the knight did not regret anything. Every knight hoped to die in a battle. Since he was destined to die, he would rather die on the battlefield than be forever frozen in the depths of misty mountains, never seeing the light of day. However, at this moment, a sigh suddenly rang in his mind. I guess I'll have to step in. As the words fell, a touch of emerald rose in the center of the battlefield. It was bright and vibrant, and exuded a rich vitality. However, the moment it appeared, the blood on the entire battlefield seemed to have found its home, and started flowing towards it. In a flash, the entire battlefield fell into a momentary silence. Because, at this moment, everyone felt an immense pressure bearing down on them. Everyone felt as if time came to a standstill, as if the very air had frozen. The disparity in ranks caused each and every Inferno Python to freeze. Even the distant 4 enraged Tier 2 Inferno Pythons froze. At this moment, at a speed visible to the naked, the touch of emerald continued to rise, like a new shoot growing. From an initial tender shoot to a small tree of 1 meter height. Bit by bit. Little by little, it kept growing bigger. In the blink of an eye, a willow tree had grown to the height of over 10 meters. Glancing at the frozen battlefield, Wuxia shook his head. Weak too weak. Although the Inferno Snake clan was quite large in size, he could suppress them with a snap of his finger. He could just obliterate them from the face of this earth with just his pressure. Just like now, the gigantic python entwining the knight started trembling slightly. Then, amidst countless terrified gazes, bit by bit, its body slowly flaked into blood-colored dust, scattering in the wind. You failed. I'm taking over this battlefield, Wuxia stated indifferently, then his body shook fiercely. The next moment, boom boom boom. Accompanied by fearsome tremors, his roots dug deep into the ground, continuously spreading as his body started growing to its complete form. His trunk kept thickening and in an instant, it grew so thick that several dozen people would be required to hug it. As for his canopy, it shot into the sky and spread so vast that it covered the very sky itself. All of a sudden, the desert which had only been seen scorching sun for tens of thousands of years, suddenly gained shade and greenery. A canopy woven from countless branches had blanketed an area of several kilometers. At this moment, as Wuxia looked toward the ground, he saw countless Inferno Pythons prostrating on the ground. Even the Tier 2 Inferno Pythons in the distance could not stop trembling. Not a single Inferno Snake tried to hide or flee. Wuxia's pressure was truly terrifying to the extreme. Even electric arcs could be seen streaking through the air. Still want to fight? With a shadow of a smile on his face, Yuziyu swept a gaze at the Tier 2 Inferno Pythons in the 4 different corners of the battlefield, his voice carrying a hint of mockery. However, the next moment the response Yuziyu received was an angry hiss. Hiss, with a shrill hiss, a giant red python over 10 meters long and as thick as a bucket, opened its maws as a hot energy began gathering inside. However, before it could breathe out, swoosh, a streak of emerald green flashed in the air. In a moment, much to everyone's horror, a towering emerald green glowing chain zoomed through the air, piercing straight through the throat of the python. I gave you a choice and you still won't listen? Yuziyu sneered, channeling his spiritual energy. Gulp, gulp, accompanied by a sound of swallowing, the body of this python shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a moment it was reduced into a red snakeskin, slowly floating to the ground. Gulp. A knight, who had joined Yuziyu after Lu Ziyen, gulped nervously, horrified. As expected of the tree monster, muttering to himself, the knight lowered his head even further. Meanwhile, Yuziyu did not attach any importance to it. Rather, he was relishing the harvest, the 180,000 evolution points, and the increase in his spiritual energy by 40,000 to 50,000. At his current cultivation he had started to feel the impending bottleneck. He could no longer enjoy continuous increase in his spiritual energy at a terrifying speed by simply cultivating in seclusion. Whereas devouring the spiritual energy of mutant beasts could provide a certain degree of growth, just like now. And this was another one of the reasons driving Yuziyu to travel. Compared to everything else, Yuziyu found his own strength of paramount importance. Training the knights, Lupin, and the others was only of convenience. After all, no matter who was fighting, at the end of the day, it was still Yuziyu who was reaping the rewards. Moreover, in a way that he would not incur public wrath. After all, while improving his cultivation by killing others might sound tempting, it would bring down the wrath of heaven and humans on him. If the world got the wind of it, it was possible that the entire world would be against him. It just so happens that Yuziyu had the strength feared by others. As such, taking a different approach was better. Just like now, he could slowly reap rewards under the guise of cultivating his subordinates. Although it was slower, it was advantageous in terms of safety. Furthermore, he could also build a good reputation, which would prove to be of significant help for the founding of his own country in the future. It would also help him attract powerful transcendence among mutant beasts. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 398, the legendary mutant beast, Snake Queen. At this moment, Yuziyu shifted his gaze and looked at the 3 remaining giant Tier 2 pythons not far away. What about you? But before his voice could even fade away, another hiss resounded. However, before its hiss could end, Yuziyu's glowing emerald branch had already pierced into its body. What Yuziyu failed to notice was the wronged look in the depths of the Tier 2 flame python's eyes. Poor thing, it just wanted to roar. It never expected for itself to die like this. Anyhow, thanks to the lessons learned from these 2 instances, the entire battlefield fell into silence again. Not a single python dared to make a sound. This invisible oppression was too terrifying. Moreover, Yuziyu's actions were gradually breaking down their psychological defenses. They already have low intelligence, and now, after experiencing repeated psychological torment, it would be strange that they could endure any further. Just at this moment, a grim voice rang in their ears again. One last chance, think it through. Just at the drop of these words. Hiss. A mournful hiss reverberated, but halfway through, as if recalling something, the owner of this hiss, the Tier 2 Inferno Python, shot a glance at Yuziyu, his eyes flickering with fear. Afterward, before Yuziyu could make a move, it decisively lowered its body. The stronger one was, the more they feared. The wiser one was, the more afraid they were of death. This was the nature of all living beings, regardless of how strong they were. Yuziyu had easily subdued these inferno snakes, making good use of this point. As for why Yuziyu had not attempted this kind of subjugation on other groups, there were very few groups that Yuziyu found worthy of subjugation. A den of mutant snakes like inferno pythons, born in fire, possessing high heat resistance and capable of flexibly using the fire element, was excellent. This kind of group could be called a high-level mutant beast species, second only to the unfathomable royal clan among mutant beasts. At this moment, with this inferno python prostrating, the other struggling Tier 2 inferno python also stopped resisting and decisively lowered its head. Hiss, hiss. Hiss, hiss. One soft hiss followed another as the remaining inferno pythons prostrated themselves. Since even their leaders had surrendered, it was futile to resist any further. Great, great! Yuziyu broke into a hearty laughter as his canopy shook violently. Pitter-patter, star. The next moment, countless green specks of light rained down like raindrops, diluting the scent of blood on the entire battlefield. At the same time, many inferno pythons coiled their bodies in comfort and pleasure. Rain of vitality, an application of life essence which can help in healing the body. This was an ability that Yuziyu liked to use. However, the most important aspect about it was that it also helped Yuziyu infuse his aura into the target, branding them as the members of Misty Mountains. Now, since the influence of Misty Mountains was becoming more and more formidable, things would become hectic without such clear markings. Meanwhile, on a distant sand dune, a figure was silently staring at the distant towering tree blanketing the sky, a look of shock on its face. How is this possible? Seemingly incredulous, the figure's voice carried a rare sense of astonishment. However, after a moment, the pupils of this figure contracted sharply, as if realizing something. Is that it? Muttering to itself, the figure's expression drastically changed. It was a legendary existence. Although no one had seen it take action, both mutant beasts and humans alike considered it the uncrowned queen of this continent. Majestic as the vast sea, malevolent as the depths of hell, this phrase was the best interpretation for it. Now, gazing at the towering giant tree from afar, this figure began to understand why it was praised as the most ferocious entity on the continent by the humans. No one was at its level. It covered the entire sky, and its mere presence affected the surroundings. The aura radiating from it was so terrifying that everyone under its influence would feel as if their entire body was frozen. Hoo! Covering its chest, the figure tried hard to suppress the unease in its heart. Just at this moment, as if detecting it, a gentle voice echoed in the figure's ears, "Nice to meet you, my dear friend from afar." Hearing this voice, the figure, without a moment of hesitation, turned around and fled, throwing the giant tree behind it. Its speed was so terrifying that it left a series of afterimages before transforming into a streak of light, zooming through the desert. Surprisingly, it disappeared in a flash. However, just at this moment, a charming voice suddenly rang beside it. "Just where do you think you're going?" Amidst a gentle laughter, crimson flames swept towards the figure. Courting death. The figure did not hesitate either. Shouting in a cold voice, it flipped its hands and smacked them towards the surging flames. Meanwhile, watching the figure clash with Nine Tails, Yuziyu in the distance could not help but squint his eyes slightly. There was no denying that there were only a few things that could surprise him. And now, such a thing had actually appeared before him. A strange figure with the upper body of human and the lower body of a snake. However, she did not appear fiendish like Bull Demon, rather she looked extremely beautiful. Upon closer inspection, her human form resembled a slim and slender woman. Her thin black robe perfectly outlined her ravishing curves. At a glance, she appeared extremely beautiful and mesmerizing. Her facial features were strikingly beautiful, with phoenix-like eyes that emitted a peculiar and enchanting allure. Although she had just shouted softly, Yuziyu still managed to capture her voice from afar, which carried a hint of warmth and tenderness, seemingly whispering to his ears. However, this beautiful woman had the lower body of a snake, very much like the legendary Nuwa who possessed the upper body of a human and a lower body of a snake. Emerald scales covered her snake tail, shimmering under the dazzling sunlight, radiating a unique brilliance. Snake Queen, as if recalling something, Yuziyu's heart suddenly became clear. Snake Queen, the legendary mutant beast that roamed the depths of the desert all year round, the most terrifying mutant beast in the desert kingdom, that could turn any creature into a lifeless statue with just a glance. Its bizarre methods made even the strongest tremble with fear. And now, this notorious mutant beast, the Snake Queen, was clashing with Nine Tails. Yip! With a rare fox scream, the sea of flames in the sky gathered into a gigantic figure tens of meters tall. It was made from flames, yet it appeared as tangible as a real body. The next moment, its giant claw smacked down. Boom. Accompanied by extreme heat, the area within a few kilometers shook violently. The spot where Nine Tails' palm fell, everything had been charred black as if molten lava had flowed through. This, furrowing her brows, the Snake Queen looked at Nine Tails with a gaze of incredulity. She had never heard of a mutant beast this powerful. What she found even more unbelievable was the fact that Ninetales could easily deal with her petrification. She may be having a hard time accepting it, but Snake Queen did not stop even for a moment. Rather, she narrowed her eyes again. Boom! Immediately after, the air along her gaze shook. At the same time, wherever her gaze fell, the desert began to petrify. Even some withered plants instantly petrified. Minor divine ability, petrification. Wherever the gaze falls, the soul will be captured, and a large amount of elemental energy will continuously gather, filling the target and eventually turning it into stone. Evolution begins with a big tree, Chapter 399, a legendary battle. Minor divine ability, petrification. Wherever the gaze falls, the soul will be captured and a large amount of elemental energy will continuously gather, filling the target and eventually turning it into stone. This was Snake Queen's innate divine ability. Due to some kind accident during her development, she came to possess this divine ability after she was born. However, this divine ability consumed a certain kind of energy that Snake Queen called the ocular force. If she consumed a lot of this energy, it would cause her eyes to ache, or worse, her vision would become blurry. At this moment, Snake Queen was staring fixedly at the enormous fox amidst the sea of fire in the distance. Subsequently, a stony texture began to spread along the desert in between the two at a speed visible to the naked eyes. He, Ninetales chuckled, paying not much attention to it. Ordinary people, or even many transcendents of the same tier, might find this technique pretty fearsome, but unfortunately she was Ninetales, who possessed the celestial fox bloodline. She was perfect in every way. Even her insight had reached an extreme level. At this moment she could clearly see a mysterious energy eroding everything like waves, and at a very fearsome speed at that. It might be fast, but it's not faster than me. In a rare moment of laughter, the flames under Ninetales surged. Immediately afterward, much to the astonishment of Snake Queen, Ninetales' figure blurred, before instantly disappearing from her sight. How ridiculously fast! Snake Queen heaved a sigh, feeling helpless. Her minor divine ability was useless against opponents with astonishing speed and the ability to detect her power. Now, she had unfortunately encountered one who could do both. However, this was not the end. Since the minor divine ability is useless, then let's just duke it out. Thinking of this, the Snake Queen flicked her snake tail. Boom! Asterisk, kicking the sand into the air, her figure merged into the sand. At the same time. Asterisk, bang bang bang. Consecutive collisions echoed across the desert. The next moment, the sand that was kicked into the air gathered into a colossal python, 30 to 40 meters long, no smaller than the red fox of flames in the air. Yip! Deep and resonant fox screams and spine-chilling shrill hisses continuously rang, intermixing with each other, drowning even the sounds of their clash. Now, right this instant, there were only two behemoths continuously clashing in the desert. From the initial few kilometers to tens of kilometers, their battlefield kept growing bigger and bigger. Flame Pillar. Shouting in her heart, Ninetales, concealed within the waves of flames, raised her head before opening her jaws and breathing out. With a thunderous roar, the flames breathing out of her mouth turned into a pillar as thick as a water bucket, shooting straight towards Snake Queen. Only before it could get close to Snake Queen, a tremendous amount of sand rose from the ground, taking the shape of a shield several kilometers high. Asterisk, kaboom. Asterisk, immediately after, a deafening crash shook the desert for dozens of kilometers. The resulting shockwave kicked the dust high up into the air, creating a sandstorm. At this moment, if one looked at the center of the battlefield, they would see a collision of sand and flames, occupying the sky and ground half and half. One half was filled with sand and the other half was filled with flames. At their point of intersection, the sand seemed to crystallize under high temperatures, turning transparent. However, before this crystallization could continue further, Ninetales' pupils suddenly shrank. At the same time, even more terrifying flames began to surge from her mouth. Asterisk, boom. Asterisk, the formidable high temperature seemed to distort the air, creating a mirage around Ninetales. However, it was these extremely hot flames that completely broke through the blockade of sand. Asterisk, kaboom. Asterisk, with a sky-shattering clap, the sand shield was completely penetrated. Immediately afterward, the increasingly thick flame pillar cut the desert in half. From a distance, it appeared as if a laser beam was fired, leaving a charred track. Be that as it may, No sign of satisfaction could be found on Ninetail's face. Only because warning bells rang in her mind, warning her of impending danger. "So, you're hiding in the sand?" Ninetails whispered to herself as she pointed her limbs towards the desert. "Scorched earth." As she uttered, a burst of deep red flames surged from Ninetails, spreading in all directions with Ninetails in the center. "Ah!" Suppressing the twitching of the corners of her mouth, Snake Queen, hidden deep underneath the sand, promptly retreated. In the face of such an unreasonable wide-scale attack, not to mention sneak attacks, even getting close was a tall order. In addition, Snake Queen had observed a formidable aspect of Ninetails. Witnessing Ninetails employing widespread assaults continuously, she deduced that Ninetails harbored an inexhaustible reserve of spiritual energy. Snake Queen discerned no indications of fatigue in Ninetails. At this moment, a voice rang in Yu's ear, "Divine Tree, who do you think will win?" Watching the spectacle, the five-color spirit flower asked curiously, a rare occurrence for her. "Ninetails won't lose," Yu promptly replied, smiling. "Won't lose? How can you be so sure?" The five-color spirit flower was a bit puzzled. The next moment, looking at the puzzled five-color spirit flower, Yu explained, "The most astonishing aspect of Ninetails lies in her mastery over spiritual energy, coupled with an unceasing source of spiritual energy. To be more precise, even after unleashing consecutive formidable techniques, her spiritual energy remains plentiful. She exhibits no signs of physical exhaustion. There is no significant difference between her current state and the state at the outset of the battle." "Ah!" Listening to Yu's explanation, the five-color spirit flower was once again left bewildered. Is she the legendary perpetual motion machine? In a daze, the five-color spirit flower looked towards the battlefield again. The next moment, she saw Ninetails erupting with stronger flames, as if they were endless, dyeing the sky horribly red. The scorching flames gushing out of her were powerful enough to burn down half the city, and enough to turn this desert into hell. The spectacle stirred intense emotions within the five-color spirit flower, leaving her in a state of numbness. Indeed, she deserves to be the elder sister of the 9 great beasts. Her skills are truly beyond anything. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.